All right. Call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council of Palos Verdes Estates. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, may I have a roll call?
Councilmember Lozey. Here. Councilmember Kemps.
Here.
Councilmember McGowan.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Murdoch.
Here.
Mayor Roos.
Here. All right, with that, can I ask for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. On to the mayor's report and matters of community interest. I'll start by saying Happy New Year to everyone, and excited to start a new era of much faster city council meetings. No, I'm kidding.
Oh my goodness.
That's what you get for calling me weird.
He's going to eat those words.
All right. I want to draw the public's attention to a couple of upcoming events. We have planned committee meetings. Beginning tomorrow night, the Parklands Committee will meet here in this room at 6:30, and next week on the 17th. The Investment Policy Advisory meeting will meet on Tuesday. I also wanted to point out for folks who have not followed along, we did do a contract renewal on Athens last year. We had asked them to send out information about the increases customers could expect, which I don't think happened, but we're doing our best to make sure folks know. So if you weren't aware, you should expect that your Athens rate will increase by $8.29, starting with the January bill. And moving on, I wanted to, on a point of transparency for the city, a couple of changes that I wanted to speak to that on our website. As we continue efforts to improve resident communication, we wanted to announce a couple of new pages that are up and available on the website now. One is a list of business permits that have been issued. So if you have an interest in that topic, you can now view all the permits that are active in the city on the website. And the other is related to Public Records Act requests. I think most folks are aware that the public has a right to request information from the city. Our small city receives a larger proportion of Public Records Act requests than most our size. In an effort to bring transparency to that, Mayor Pro Tem and I directed staff last week to begin publishing on the website a page that lists recently requested PRA requests. And so you'll find that at the moment, if you go to the website, you'll see a description of the request, the date the request was made, the name of the requestor, and later that will also be linking to the documents that result from that public records request. As always, if you're interested in following city business, please consider joining our e-newsletter and subscribing to receive notifications. You can visit pvestates.org and click on Sign Me Up, the link on the middle of the page, to get your name in on that. And with that, I'll turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to provide an update on the land side, a Cal Water project, and then we'll turn it over to the police department. In terms of the landslide, the city has been working with the Coastal Commission to discuss placement of temporary signage near the entrances to the beach area, what commonly known as Rat Beach. And we have worked successfully with them and have reached an approach that everyone has agreed to, and we have received some signs that we've ordered, and those arrived today. We expect to reopen the paths tomorrow or Friday, and those signs will be up in 4 locations that access that beach area. And then secondly, on the Cal Water project on Via Del Monte, I mentioned this at our November 22nd City Council meeting, that Cal Water was delivering notices at that time to residents along the Via Del Monte corridor between approximately Via Penale to Via Samante, notifying them of an upcoming water project that would consist of installing a new 8-inch water main along Via Del Monte from Via Panale to Via Samonte, and also on Via Panale from Via Del Monte to Via Ramon. The notices include contact information for the contractor. This project began with potholing work that was completed in early December, and we expect construction to begin very soon. The project will take a bit of time, so we're expecting that this will go through the month of April, and we'll continue to provide updates on the project as it moves forward. And with that, let me turn it over to Captain Barber with an update from our police department.
Okay, thank you very much. Honorable Mayor, City Council, as most of you know, last week our police department arrested 2 subjects who had just committed a burglary in our city. Upon serving a search warrant at a short-term rental where the subjects were staying, we recovered a large amount of stolen property. After following up with several victims, our detectives have now linked the 2 subjects to at least 4 burglaries in Palos Verdes Estates and 2 in Manhattan Beach. And they're still working on sorting out property, so it's probably going to be a lot more than that. I just want to commend our detectives because they worked tirelessly on this case. I think we had over 200 pieces of property to book into evidence, so it was a major case. And I also want to thank the Manhattan Beach Police Department for providing some of their detectives and assisting us with the search warrant. So it was a great case. Another item of note, a few weeks ago, we actually sent out a crime map with our weekly update. The crime map was so well received that we will be soon incorporating the crime map into our weekly reports on a regular basis. Thank you.
And that concludes our report.
All right, well, outstanding work for the police department. Really appreciate your continued effort. Thank you so much.
Mr. Mayor, quick question.
Yes.
Was the short-term rental a violation of the short-term rental ordinance?
That I don't know because it was in the city of Los Angeles and I
Oh,
don't know
okay.
what their ordinance is.
All right, with that, we'll move on to ceremonial, to a presentation actually that we have from South Coast Botanic Garden.
Hi. Good evening and Happy New Year. See a lot of your faces.
If you can use the mic too.
Okay, I have a
Folks at
pretty
home.
loud voice, but okay. Honorable Roos, Mayor Roos, and the board, this is really a privilege to be here. You're my first people I get to speak with in the new year. I've gone from the South Bay cities to pretty much all the cities on the Hill, and just getting the word out about the South Coast Botanic Gardens and all the things we do. A little bit about myself. I've been with the garden about a year. Prior to that, I was with Beaches and Harbors, LA County, and then I also worked for Supervisor Janice Hahn, so been around a little bit. So I just want to go through, and I know your time is very valuable. I just want to go through this kind of quickly to let you know that our mission is to connect to all people, and that's the only thing that's really changed in the amount of time since we've been around, since 1960. Because we want people to experience nature and create experiences that are not only good for your physical health, but also good for your mental health as well. And we found that during the pandemic, how many people were so thankful that we stayed open, we were open, and to be able to come on the Sundays when you can walk your dog, the dog walking days, and how many people wish we were doing that during the week. So I just keep telling our executive team, I know people would like to have more days. So we're working on stewardship and sustainability because we're very fortunate to be here with 87 acres on the hill. So right now we are working on immersive plans too with the young and the old, and I'll bring this up because this has already started, but we will be having a groundbreaking ceremony when it says young and old for our new 3-acre children and family garden, and it's 3 acres. It's going to be finished in 2024. We will be the first botanic garden to have an ADA accessible canopy walk above the Morton fig trees, and we'll have a fossil hunt, and there will be a maze and ephemeral stream, vegetable gardens for people, so it's really a touch, smell, it really work with the sensory. So we're very excited about this. We've raised almost the amount of money, but we're still out about $1 million. I think we've raised $30 million. Thanks. So the visionary, if some of you don't know, my husband grew up on the hill from 75, and remembers going by the trash landfill and all the birds and everything circling. But Frances Young Hall was a visionary from Hermosa Beach, and she's the one who came up with the idea of, well, gosh, let's see if we can grow something on here. Anything's got to be an improvement from a landfill. And so, try, and some things work and some things don't, but it's a lot of things are there. Rose garden, we have a cactus garden, we have just beautiful things from plants and trees from Australia, New Zealand, Africa, you name it. So it's just a beautiful, quiet, peaceful place, and I feel really fortunate to work there. So we have 3 women on our executive team, and on the left is Marilyn Mack, and then on the right picture there is Adrienne Nakashima, and she's our CEO and has been there for 12 years and has really turned the garden around. And then it's Danielle, and I'm drawing a blank at the moment, but thank you. That's really awful. I'll think about it for a minute, sorry. It's been a long day. Anyway, they're great. I enjoy working with them. Adrienne hired me, and I enjoy working with the communities and getting the word out and coming to the Chamber of Commerce events and seeing what's going on. We have Dottie's, which is now a container that has been opened for food and drinks and beverages. It's been open during the year as well. Alan and Dorothy Lay donated $1 million, so that's how she gets her name on the container. And we were also able to work with that area for tables and chairs for our Sunset series. It has a living wall and also the Staghorn collection. So if you haven't had a chance to see that, come by. Have a drink or something too. Okay, so we did have SOAR. I don't know if any of you have been there, but to the garden before, hopefully yes, and hopefully you're all members. So now we're going to be having the tropical butterflies come back in the spring. We've just finished with the spider pavilion, and I have to say, I haven't been a really big spider person, but I do understand the purpose in the ecosystem. And it wasn't scary at all, and none of them tried to land on me. People ask me that all the time in the garden. So, people have seen a lot of movies, I think, that kind of, unfortunately, don't represent it the best. But anyway, they're beautiful. There's a lot of colors. We had tarantulas. We had these ober, the spiders, and then the tarantulas, and then what's the other one? Who knows? They're spiders. No? Okay. Well, we'll go with tarantulas and mainly the ohm. Okay, this we had a backdrop. And then people love their dogs, and the Halloween costume was a hit. People dressed up as well as their dogs. So if you can't find humor in this world, why are we here, right? So right now, the one we have, which I want to let you know, is through January 24th. And this is Sean Kenny's Nature Pop. We had it a couple years back. They're about 40 exhibits, and they're very tall and large, of different sizes, and polar bears and lions and you name it. And it's beautiful to walk, but also we have purchased an e-vehicle, and there's about 20 people that can fit in there, because it's, obviously with the land still moving, as we all know, still a lot of hills and everything, but I have taken a couple people on tours in the e-vehicle and really enjoyed it, and you can see everything. So that's free with admission, and obviously if you're a member too. Astrolumina has been, I don't know if anybody's seen this, I had a chance to see it on their rehearsal night. It's really beautiful. This is a company from Europe, and Fever, and this other one also produced the immersive Van Gogh, if anybody had a chance to see that. And it's just beautiful to walk through the garden and, bundle up and just see the lights and experience it and the stars and the music and everything. It's very peaceful and very relaxing. So I do recommend it. It was going to be finishing this month, but they have extended it because of how popular it has been. Okay, and the other great one that I'm excited about, because I'm a big ocean person and love the beach, is Washed Ashore. So just like the name says, everything that is, as we all know, not all good, washed ashore. And it's the pieces that have come, that this exhibit is full of all things that wash up on shore. It's to bring, conservative, recycling, just everything about water, conservancy. It's a great exhibit. I'm very excited about it. And literally, these pieces are about 20 feet, 15 feet high, really large throughout the garden. So as you can see, we've got the octopus there and the shark. So, and then I already went over the children and family garden. And we do have a green team. So if anybody has time on their hands and would like to volunteer, we do have that person, and I can leave my cards with you, and if anybody wanted to get a hold of it. And be a dog walking volunteer. Yeah, so that's the last Sunday, third Sunday of the month. Okay, so that's okay. Nature pops up, horticulture volunteers, and we are also working on a school program for the Washed Ashores to get the schools involved, and also repurposing, recycling, figuring out ways we can work and help our environment. So saving the dates, these are all around, but April 1st is Washed Ashore, to let you know. It is the last Sunday of every month. And Astra Lumina and Nature Pop. And who doesn't love Lego bricks? Because I know my girls used to love building with them. They're not engineers, but they loved building with them. And that's about all I have. I just want to thank you for inviting me to come and share what's going on. And hopefully I'll leave my card. And if I have had other mayors come and bring their staff and have a little field trip, and I'd be happy to give you a tour. And just good to get out of the office sometimes, as I say. So you're welcome to come anytime. So please contact me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
On to communications from the public. This portion of the agenda is reserved for comments from the public on items which are not on the agenda. Due to state law, no action can be taken by the council this evening on matters presented under this section. If the council determines action is warranted, the item may be referred to staff or placed on a future council agenda. And I have one card from Ms. Karen Logan.
Hello, Honorable Mayor, City Council, City staff, and residents. My name is Karen Logan. I represent the PVE Neighborhood Watch, and I am the Valmonte Area Coordinator. And as usual, we like to participate in our community, contribute to all the good work that the City Council and the city staff and the police department are doing. And so as we start the new year, we're inviting residents to consider being a part of PVE Neighborhood Watch as a volunteer and as part of your New Year's plans. It's a great way to build friendships and give back to your community. It's easy, fun, and rewarding, and hey, we're a fun group of people to work with, so good people if you want to build your friendships. PVE Neighborhood Watch has been serving our city for over 40 years, so we're carrying on a really great legacy. We'd love to have residents help us build the safety, community connection, and well-being of our neighborhoods. We're looking for block captains, and we have other opportunities for residents to share their talents and experiences. You can see our list of volunteer opportunities on our website, pvenw.org. We also have volunteer opportunities for students. In recent years, we've been working with our local youth on various events and projects. It has been an honor to meet such promising individuals and support them in their volunteer hours. Contact us if you are a youth or you know of a youth who's interested in working with us, and we'll match you up with one of our projects or activities that's scheduled for the upcoming year. We're proud of how PVE Neighborhood Watch has grown in our community outreach, our educational programs, assistance to our residents, and support of our first responders. We hope that you will consider joining us to continue this tradition of giving to our city. As an example of our recent activities, we provided hot cocoa at the Santa Meet and Greet event in Malaga Cove this December. We provided meals for our police and fire department that worked on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And we held a Zoom e-bike safety event in collaboration with the PVEPD and local community leaders. To find out more about volunteering, events, or safety resources, go to our website. We got a lot of stuff there. It's updated nearly every week. We keep it fresh and very relevant. So I hope you'll go out and visit us, and I hope you will also consider being a volunteer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parker, was your card for communications from the public? Okay. And this is not related to item 8? Correct. Okay.
Good evening. The city needs to do a much better job of enforcement on the gas blower ban. The landscape companies are mostly ignoring it. You should educate the public, the residents, and the operators by news articles, etc., and inform residents to not hire companies that use gas blowers. That's not a hard thing to do. I see them all the time, and it's really not getting much better. Let me relay some experiences right surrounding my house. A while back, the lady's husband next door had died in an airplane crash, and I called 3 times on her gardener, and he just kept ignoring it. The last time I called, I was in my house, and Belda had come on the call, and I was standing like 13 feet away. I could hear their conversation, and she's telling him, well, look how big my yard is. So the police officer should have told her, it doesn't matter how big your yard is or how many houses you own, it's against the law. So that was not a very good job of policing. And the reason I'm telling you this is he ended the conversation by telling her, why don't you call code enforcement and turn it around on him because the leaves from his trees are falling in your yard. That's not the way, that wasn't right. Okay, then another time, a couple months later, adjacent lot right below me, right next to the Papa residence, the woman who was our interim city manager. They were cutting down the trees. There's about 6 80-foot trees blocking our view, and they were really horrendous. So after they were done with the chainsaws all day cutting, they fired up the gas blower for a couple hours. And yes, I called, and Gaunt came out, and he did nothing. He's standing there talking to him, looking for an excuse to not write a ticket, calling Captain Halinga. And that wasn't right. He should have just stopped him and said, look, go borrow a battery blower, get one. Don't be doing that. So please do a better job on the gas blowers. And I have a suggestion. I already brought it up once. Empower the volunteer guys in the white marquees to take care of that. It would be very simple for them and really useful.
Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to our consent agenda. We have 7 items here. City Council action minutes, warrants, Planning Commission actions of December 20th, 2022, receipt and file of financial statements for the period ending October 31st, 2022, receipt and filing of Special Tax and Bond Accountability Act Report SB 165 for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022, 2023 City Council Liaison and Committee Assignments and Traffic Safety Committee Action Minutes of May 4th, 2022 and September 7th, 2022. I would like to remove item 6 for a brief discussion. Otherwise, for the remaining 6 items, is there anything anyone has concerned about, or I will entertain a motion to approve those 6?
I'm just going to make a comment, and I brought to the attention of the city clerk that in the first item, the first set of minutes from the September 27th meeting, it was on page 5, items 13 and 14 were missing the vote. So it said, oh, there was a motion, and who made the motion and who seconded a motion, but then it didn't say what the vote was, and she is going to correct that, correct? Yeah. Perfect. And then the other one has to do with number 6, so that's fine.
Okay.
Question on item 2.
Go ahead.
May I ask the question on item 2, or does it need to be pulled?
I would recommend pulling the item if you have questions going to lead to discussion about it. It's not a quick.
All right, we will pull number 2. I have a motion on 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7.
I'll move that we.
Go ahead.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda items 1, 3, 4, 5,
Don't we need public comment?
and 7.
Actually, we do need public comment first. I don't have any cards. If there's any public comment. No, okay. I'm sorry. I heard your motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Those items pass. We can start with item 2. Warrants, what's your question?
So one of the items in the warrants was a final payment to the retired police chief, and I have no challenge with that. What I think this brings an opportunity, because it's the second time in my tenure here that this has occurred, I think we have an opportunity here for transparency. And I don't even necessarily mean transparency around the item itself. I think the issue is both the council and the public need to understand what the city's future liabilities are. And when we set a budget for a particular fiscal year, when we receive a surprise that's in excess of 6 figures, it's challenging to work that into the budget, and then it causes unnecessary frustration. So my question, I'm sorry because I never get the title right. I'm going to use finance director. I apologize. My question for Stephen is there a way that that we can work into the recurring financial reports that come to the council and get published to the public, that the status on those employees, granted we've made changes to MOUs and prior to certain date employees versus now, we don't need to get into all those details. But what I'm looking for is to help the council understand from a budgeting perspective, and the city on a go-forward, the city's residents on a go-forward basis, understand what those potentially hidden liabilities may be so that we can report out on them.
Yes, and it's a calculation that we do every year as part of the annual financial report. We do calculate a compensated balances, or PTO, paid time off liability. At the end of last year, that liability was $238,000, of which
So this is 165 or whatever of that?
pretty much more than half of it, yes, that is correct. It is something that can be duplicated. It takes a little bit of time. It's just to run a report and then convert it to an estimated dollar amount. So
I obviously don't know the feelings of my fellow council members, but this doesn't typically come up until something like this occurs, and then you start to hear, musings in the community about, wow, that number was so large, why, right? And so I think if everyone understood, that there's been a bunch of work that's been done on MOUs to sort of control that liability going forward, and also to understand what it really is on a go-forward basis, then when it occurs, it's, that ticked down that number that much.
yeah.
Do we reserve for that? So when when you do a calculation and you say, okay, I expect my liability to be $250,000, do we reserve? Or is it just strictly pay as you go? What do we do?
No, it's treated as pay as you go from a financial statement perspective. We could put some money aside if we wanted to at the end of each year. That's something we can certainly consider doing.
See, from my perspective, I wouldn't need to see this on a regular financial report, but if I saw it once a year, so Stephen, if I saw it either when you do it at the end of the year, so that as we go into the next budget cycle, we can have a sense, because then we'll kind of know who's on the cusp of retirement, and we can decide, do we need to put in some kind of a line item or not. So I don't think it needs to be multiple times a year, but if we even just got it one time a year so we could be cognizant when we're entering the budget cycle, I think that would benefit all.
Maybe a line item within that, each department's budget of what they think is coming, and just so you kind of.
Stephen, did you indicate that this was shown on the balance sheet of the city?
That's correct in this.
And then it's already been expensed if it's been shown on the balance sheet, is it not correct?
In the government-wide statements, that is correct, but not in the fund financial statements, which is different.
See, therein lies the confusion that Councilmember Kemps is trying to address here, that we need. It's so convoluted, and when these payments were made, I think I sent you an email suggesting that you need to put more explanation around just telling us that the number was going to be X number of dollars, because it creates this kind of confusion and discussion, which is unnecessary.
Well, even if it was, okay, I'm not the accountant, so I could be off here, but even if it were on the balance sheet, at the end of the day, it does hit our budget, which affects what our budgeted operating surplus was, correct?
Because there are two different types of accounting.
Right.
Two different systems, and we're confusing the two of them is the problem.
Okay.
Get a motion to approve the warrants?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Moving on to City Council Liaison and Committee assignments. There was one change that I wanted to propose from the staff report, which I wrote, but the tennis club has specifically requested that Dawn and I continue as liaisons, and their interest, especially in my participation, has been the work that I did related to parking, and I thought that was a reasonable request, so I wanted to suggest we keep that assignment unchanged since last year, and otherwise, if there's anyone else that had any comments on these, now would be a good time.
I think continuity is good on some of these work, when we're working on stuff like that, so that's good. And then I'll just, I had sent the mayor an email earlier saying that we actually have to provide a liaison to two entities where we have actually residents who it's in their wheelhouse and they agree to do it, but that's the LAX Noise Roundtable and then also the LA County West Vector Control District. So I think you'll be appointing those, right?
We can do that now, I think. What is the?
You probably have to call them and ask them and make sure they're still willing
still
to
willing?
do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you can do that later. Maybe you
Sure.
could just put that on consent next time. But
Sure.
just in case any residents actually follow these, and those are kind of important that we be represented. So add those to your list for next time.
Mr. Mayor, I have another issue. I believe that we need to revisit the audit committee definition. I am not satisfied with the current definition of what our audit committee consists of, and I believe we need to expand that to include at least one person that is viewed as a financial expert, very similar to what the private sector does. And we need to be able to have the expertise to work with the auditors, to set the work plans, to review the internal controls, and to resolve any accounting issues that may arise. And therefore, I would like to postpone the nomination of that committee until we can redefine the committee structure.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, and I thought I had my little pile here, but I don't.
the treasurer on?
Actually, yes, I was going to say, the way it's written here is actually not accurate. So can you pull that up? It actually it does include the city treasurer. And because we reworked that last year, and it also added the line that allows the mayor to bring in additional resources from the Finance Advisory Committee, for example, as needed.
Mr. Russin, does the addition of the treasurer turn this into a Brown Act body?
No.
Well, if they're a full member of it, potentially, I would want to look into that and report back to you about
Yeah,
what the structure is that was approved.
Because one of the things, right now, we do have a treasurer that meets the requirements that I'm describing, but in the future, I'm looking at in perpetuity. We've had a number of treasurers that don't have that expertise and background, and I think we need to make sure we have the provisions established for that.
I'm with you, Victoria. I thought we had already done that. We
Trying
had
to find it.
stipulated it was
Treasurer
mayor,
We talked about it, but we never acted
We
on it.
did, no, we did,
Excuse me.
we did.
Because it was
The treasurer is listed as staff supporting that committee, so
Yeah, not a member. So
Right.
does not require an appointment.
And it does say in the description, the mayor may at any time invite a subject matter expert to meet with the committee.
Okay, so I'll tell you my thoughts on it. The audit committee doesn't do the audit, and they don't run the audit either, so I'm not sure that they don't have to have the expertise of an auditor. I think that
I agree.
I think that the Mayor Pro Tem and I have sufficient expertise here that we know what we know and know what we don't know and can pull in as appropriate. And I'll also point out that, frankly, most of the findings in our last audit were things that were closer to my wheelhouse than they were to a financial expert's. They were controls and technology related. So that's my 2 cents. I don't disagree with you. I think that there's some value that we could have in pulling in as needed, say the chair of the FAC, but I don't see a need to formalize it.
I would disagree with one of the comments that you made, that the audit committee is the one that retains the audit firm, and the audit committee, the auditor is responsible to the audit committee in this type of an arrangement. So that's one of the reasons why I think having the financial expertise as an embedded part of that committee is imperative.
I actually think the city council hires the auditors, don't they? I don't think the audit committee hires the auditors.
Yeah, city council approves the contract.
Yeah. And I'm looking for
But
minutes from last time, but I don't see
So
it.
the
Correction
audit
is
committee
set
is
by the
essentially,
audit
yeah,
committee.
Well-
that's fair point.
We hashed this around a year ago, and I think that what we landed at is that the city treasurer should be on the audit committee, and I guess we put it as a staff support as opposed to audit committee member, I guess. And that the mayor reserves the right to bring in an expert. Because I also, city treasurer and I talked about this recently, and, because it said, well, the chair of the finance advisory committee should be on the audit committee. Well, okay, today, the chair of the finance advisory committee has audit experience, but the last chair didn't. So, so I think that I like how we did it last year. I think we should leave it how we did it last year.
I'll disagree because I don't think that that's good for the long term. I would suggest that we ask our city attorney to go back and look at appropriate language that we can do exactly what we've done in the past, but ensure that if our treasurer is not have those financial expertise in the future, that there's a remedy to resolve it. Right now, I don't see that.
Mr. Kemps, do you have an opinion here?
Honestly, no.
Mayor Pro Tem?
I like what we have.
Me too.
I do too. So, Dave, if you don't mind, I think, I understand where you're coming from, and I think that we'll.
I mean, so long as the two of you were cognizant about bringing in the right resource to
Yeah.
drop them in, in conjunction with what your concerns are.
Well, we'll have the treasurer there as support.
Right now, the treasurer's got that expertise. That's my point. I'm worried that in the
Okay,
future.
but when the day comes when the treasurer doesn't have that expertise, the mayor will bring in a different resource.
But it's not written that way, I don't believe.
It is written that way. It's written in that, read it again, please.
I'll read the full. So it says that this committee reviews the comprehensive annual financial report prepared each year by the city's auditors. It also examines the management letter prepared by the auditors. Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem serve as the council representatives. The mayor may at any time invite a subject matter expert to meet with the committee. The committee was the mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and then staff support was city manager, director of city support services, and city treasurer.
Yeah, I like it.
I personally don't think that's adequate, but
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay.
Anything else you wanted to bring up?
I'd like to ask about the ad hocs, because I'm not sure that all the ad hocs have been identified. I know there's one that Dawn and I are a member of, the Long Range Planning, and I would also raise the question about the fire liaison, because of, I would like to continue on that because of the knowledge and the experience I've had in working with that for 4 years.
Fire liaison, or you mean the ad hoc committee that is evaluating opportunities to reduce costs?
Well, it's an opportunity to reduce costs, but I think we've got some questions that we've raised recently about the contract itself.
Okay. So we did have a little bit of a challenge identifying all of the various ad hoc committees that we have. And for purpose, I've gotten the question already about the 2 ad hoc committees that you mentioned, and my position is absent a change, they continue to exist. So then there's no need for us to address them here.
Yeah.
And with their existing members.
I feel like I think you did a good job of capturing the ad hocs. We have a lot of them. So, no, I
So
thought
the
you did a
question
good
Dave
job.
has is about, with regard to the ad hoc that is labeled evaluate opportunities to reduce cost of contracted fire services. He's interested in participating in that. He has prior experience there. That might be valuable.
As do I. I liked partnering with Councilmember Kemps on that. I think we're probably a good team on that.
I'm happy to work with whoever.
Dawn?
Mayor? Your assignments.
They are my assignments. And
Well, let me also say, or back away on behalf of someone else.
are you interested in letting Victoria and Dave run with it?
I'm happy to do it with either one of them, and I'm happy to back away at your,
Okay.
at your,
Can the 2 of you work together?
Who?
who?
You and Miss Losey.
That's fine.
Okay.
There's a lot of history that goes behind it, and part of it are allocation and operational costs, and it also ties together with their commitments in the original contract, which has to be reviewed.
Victoria, you okay with that?
Oh, totally.
Okay, so we'll change that one to Losey and McGowan.
One
And-
point of clarification.
Yes.
One of the ad hoc committees is described as review a ecom study, City Hall, and incorporate into long-range financial plan.
Mhm.
Emphasis on and incorporate into long-range financial plan.
I'm not sure what that means, to be honest with you.
Right. A, happy to partner with you and happy to review the study. B, absolutely unconditionally will not accept it as the only study. And C, will not incorporate it into the long-range plan without the additional study. And D, clarification that that vendor who provides the information will be restricted from bidding on anything associated with what they recommend.
Well, we're not here to make those policy decisions.
I understand,
I will-
but the reason for saying that is because it specifically states that I'm going to participate in an ad hoc that will incorporate it into a long-range financial
Yeah,
plan.
At a high-
it's a funny sentence, for
Yeah,
sure.
at a high level, this is reviewing the AECOM study and not more.
So I actually had an issue with that. It's so funny. It started out so
Wait,
easy.
are we still on this item, or are you moving on to another one?
No, I'm still on that one.
Okay.
So I had an issue with this one because I recall, maybe this is another thing for the city clerk to check, but I recall that when we assigned the ad hoc, we assigned the mayor and the mayor pro tem, no names, but the mayor and the mayor pro tem, because we recognized it as a multi-year, kind of a continuous multi-year project, and so having the mayor and the mayor pro tem as people who keep rolling through, there's continuity there. And so I recall that we specifically appointed that as no names, but position. The mayor and the mayor pro tem were that ad hoc. And so I'd actually like us to relook at that in the minutes, because I could be wrong, but that's what I remember.
Well, we can, in this action, change them. And that was considered, and I chose these people.
Well, I don't know if that's true. If the city council appointed,
Well, the same-
said that that it will be the mayor and the mayor pro tem, I don't think one mayor can come in and say, okay, it's no longer what the city council agreed.
We've already agreed, this is going to be an action of the council, this item.
Say that again?
This item will be an action of the council, so this city council will again decide to make these appointments. I'm not making them unilaterally.
Because we will vote on them.
Mhm.
So it's a new vote. My concern about what you're proposing is there could be a lack of continuity, at least only, one person's for a year and then they get replaced by the mayor pro tem, but then another person comes in.
We'd
if
be
it's a
on for
long-term
2
thing.
years. When you're the mayor pro tem and the mayor, so you were always on for 2 years, and then someone else was on for 2 years.
My other thing is, I think we need to sever the connection with the long-range plan, because we've already got an ad hoc working on the long-range plan. Now, someone can feed information to them, but to hold this other.
Yeah, it doesn't even make sense. No. It's just AECom, because it can't be both, because the long-range plan has its own ad hoc, and it's not the same people.
That addresses my concern.
So take out the "and incorporate long-range plan"?
I mean, I don't know exactly where if the language comes from a resolution of the council or what, but that's not what they're going to do, because they can't. They're Brown Act
Look,
prohibited.
the bottom line is, it's an ad hoc that's going to review what comes forward.
Right.
And then we'll say, great, we like it, or don't like it, and we're ready or we're not ready to present it to the rest of the council. That's it. Two people aren't going to incorporate it into a financial plan.
Yeah. And part of what I'm doing here is I'm trying to balance what people are working on so that, people have similar workloads.
When the council reviewed this, it was May of 2022. There was a separate, I don't know if that's still on the list, but there was that, review the study and incorporate it, and then there was a separate ad hoc for just the long-range financial plan.
Right, but did you say and incorporate it?
That's what the list says. So if you guys want to separate that now, I think that they can potentially. But it looks like you already had like a separate one for the long-range financial plan, but the study always had that language for some reason, or that ad
I can
hoc.
clarify that if you would like. On the city's work plan, when we developed the work plan last year, the action item, the task, if you will, was to review the AECom, City Hall, and incorporate it into the long-range financial plan. So we can adjust the work plan language to remove the second half of that phrase and clarify it.
Okay. Are you okay with the appointments?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No, but yes.
Okay.
And then who was the long-range financial plan? And are we sticking?
that is,
Are you adding that, and are you keeping it the same?
David and me.
But are you keeping that the same?
If it's not here, it's the same. Right?
Yeah, if there's no change made tonight, then whoever was appointed to the committee would remain on the ad hoc committee.
Well, I would ask staff then let's make sure we have a complete, comprehensive list of what all these committees are. We have so many of these things, so let's make sure we've got an accurate list. I understand that means if it's not here, you're not changing the appointment, but,
Right.
But we really need to know what all these committees are and what everybody's working on. Yeah, these are probably not my favorites.
Any other concerns? All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and move that we make these appointments as outlined in the staff report with the change that the fire service contract will be Losey McGowan, and the tennis club liaisons will be Murdoch and Roos.
Mayor.
Friendly amendment,
Yes.
and that we will sever the incorporated long-range plan for the AECom.
Can we take that action here? No.
We didn't agendize this as to make adjustments to the ad hoc committees, but when you have the work plan, you have brought that up. You can make the adjustment to, what that's going to be when you have that item later tonight.
I'm fine with that.
I was just going to ask, do you want a final list to come back?
As
Or do you just wanna
information is
send?
fine, I want to appoint them now because so that all of these agencies can get
Right.
noticed.
We'll send
Yeah.
out the letters.
Yep,
But if you want a final list brought back at the next meeting, or
that's
I can
probably-
just send it out to the council?
that's a good
I
idea.
think just send it
Okay,
out.
Just
yeah.
send it out, right?
Okay.
Yeah, just so people have it.
Okay, so I accepted my motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. That item passes. Moving on to old business. Will now be review and discussion of council ad hoc committee developed draft terms for conceptual ordinance amending section 182010 of the Palos Verdes Estates Municipal Code related to La Venta Inn and recommended community engagement process. I'll, rather than have the staff jump into a staff report, I'll just give a little preamble here and ask my colleague, Mayor Pro Tem Murdoch, to add to that. As I think a lot of folks know, this ad hoc committee was created in August or September, and with the intention of digging deeper into the questions of the impacts that La Venta's operations have on neighbors, and trying to craft a solution, whether that's an ordinance or a ZTA or otherwise, that allows them to continue to operate while mitigating the impacts to neighbors. And Councilmember Murdoch and I have been engaged in a very long process of collecting feedback from neighbors, individually having met with probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 individuals, the owner, the operator. We held a community meeting in October that was attended by 21 individuals. Prior to that meeting, we noticed via postal mail everyone who lived within a fairly large radius of the site. So we've collected a lot of information. We worked together to come up with some ideas that we think will serve to mitigate. They are, at this point, draft ideas. And our intention in bringing it here today, and just for clarity, because I think there was some confusion in the public about why this showed up here. We had been telling people we were planning to bring an ordinance back in February. We are still kind of working on that timeline. But the purpose of bringing this here today was, one, to collect any feedback from our colleagues. If there's anything in this list that is just a showstopper for someone here, we'd like to know that earlier than later. And two, in order to continue the public process here, we needed to agendize this and have it presented to the City Council on a regularly scheduled meeting. Otherwise, we would not be able to share the draft terms with the public on the website, because it's the work product of the ad hoc committee, and it would be a Brown Act violation because it would be available to the rest of the council. So, with that, the point of that is that I want to emphasize that this isn't really on the agenda for the purpose of setting a policy tonight. It is really about putting in motion the 4 weeks of public comment on these ideas, and we will we're already scheduling and planning to send out notices of a meeting on February 1st, where we will invite the public again to come and meet with us, probably here in council chambers, for a sit-down. We'll take individual meetings with concerned residents, with the owner and operator, but this is the beginning of that public process, not the end of the policy-making process. So, anything you wanted to add?
No, you actually were very exhaustive. It really has been a challenge, right? Because we've got two very different sets of opinions, ideas. You know, we've got an operator who's a consummate hostess, passionate about giving her clients an ultimate experience, and a set of 11 owners who are bearing the cost of maintaining this very expensive property and, want to earn an income from it. And then we have a set of, on the other end, residents who are living in close proximity and want to be able to enjoy their properties. And there's been an increase in activity, even from 2019. And so it's been a real challenge, trying to piece together what we're hearing throughout the probably 30 hours that we've spent talking to people, researching other event venues and whatnot. And this is a much more detailed list than I actually thought we were going to end up with. I thought this was going to be a quicker, shorter, more general exercise, and as we dug into it, we just realized that wasn't where we ended up.
All right. The question for the clerk: When should I take? Should I take public comment now or allow discussion first? There's no. Do you have any? Yeah, I guess maybe I'll ask colleagues here if they have questions for the ad hoc. Okay.
I'll ask one. How did you come up with the decibel limit boundary of 52 dBA LEQ?
Well,
Shall I take this?
yeah, I think you should.
During October, there was an 8-day period when Laventa paid for a sound engineer to come out and record the sound. And what we did was we looked through what the sound recordings were, both looking at events and looking at non-events. And there were a number of times when we had received, Jim and I had given our cell phone numbers to the residents, that if there was a problem, to contact us so we could come up and try and understand what was going on. So we knew different times when there were resident complaints. And so we looked at where the numbers were, and we looked at when residents were happy. For example, October 9th was a wedding. It was, 100 and maybe 40 people. But it was an ideal wedding, and it was quiet, and everyone was happy. And they kept it, a couple times they went to a smidge over 50. And then we looked at other ones where there were phone calls, and that's how we landed on the 52.
And, I'll point out one other thing. If it seems like an odd number, I think that it's important to keep in mind that the scale is logarithmic. So if we went to 55, that's a lot more than just 10% louder, and so that's why we ended up at 52.
I have a question about how you noticed people, kind of your community meeting. So the meeting you had in October where you said about 20 people came, how did you notice that?
What was the radius?
1,000 feet.
1,000 feet. So every household within 1,000 feet received a postcard.
In the mail?
Mhm.
Okay, and 20 people came. And how many houses are within 1,000 feet?
I don't have a list.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
Kind of an important number.
Do you remember? I thought it was like, was it a couple hundred, or?
That's what I was going to say, but I don't have it.
I remember you
There's a few
telling us
hundred.
once what the number was, but I don't recall what it is.
I can go look. I can go look and come back.
it's okay.
Okay, so normally, just to point out to people, like when we, Cheryl, when we have, just a normal planning commission thing, we notice people within 300 feet,
300
right?
feet of the
So it is
exterior
important for the community to know. I mean, we took a much larger radius and tried to look at that. And that's probably okay for, no, sorry, going with my easy questions. Saving the harder ones. No, I'm good for now.
Any other questions?
Maybe
I'll ask one more question. Is it even possible for buses not to have a backup beeper?
Yes,
Can
based
that
on
be
their
shut off?
size.
It's not like a seatbelt in a car.
It depends on the size of the bus, yes.
Smaller shuttles don't have backup beepers.
Okay, I'm not aware of that. I'm asking the question.
The same
Yeah,
restriction exists on the agreement between the neighbors and the neighborhood church.
Good point, though, but a question we asked. We did confirm that.
Okay.
I see you looking at me, was that a prompt? Can you address the potential, what I see as maybe a conflict between, so fire code capacities to be followed at all times? Do we have clarity on what those numbers are, and is there agreement?
We do, which is, we directly asked the fire department to provide us with what they say is the capacity, and it is different from an earlier document that the owner has, but we believe that we have the accurate numbers, yes.
Okay.
Just to clarify, Cheryl Brady, our Community Development Director, worked with the fire department to find the official paper trail, and in 1994, a public assembly permit was issued, and that's what was included in the staff report.
But Exhibit 4 is the current numbers, correct?
What's Exhibit 4?
Current floor plan after renovation?
No, that is,
Attachment B.
that is,
That's,
Well, it's got a fire department stamp, doesn't it? Yeah, it's got a fire department stamp
But
on
the
it.
dimensions on it are incorrect.
Then why was it included in the staff report?
It
think
was,
it
it was
was a
included as
comment.
correspondence. Someone sent that in, but it's in error.
Staff went up and measured the facility to get the correct numbers, and they are the same as what's in the 1994 document.
So do we have agreement on that, or do we have disagreement on that between?
We have agreement
Current
of it
owners
here,
and
and
operators.
I don't, to be honest with you, it's really a matter for the fire department. We don't make a determination
Well,
about
the
it.
place has been renovated since 1994, so I wouldn't hang my hat that the 1994
Has it?
is the correct.
Well,
I don't know if.
I don't know that
I don't know if
We
square
didn't-
footage has changed, but that's the question.
our interest in this particular topic arose because the other document that you have in your hand there, the one that has that one, the dimensions of the room were clearly in error. I mean, having been to the property, those dimensions were clearly not right because they did not, the long dimension should be the same as the courtyard. And so when we asked, then we directed staff to take measurements. They did. They determined it was different. Then we said, well, dig into this, and then we came up with, the fire department gave us that.
Sounds like that's still a question mark.
Well, it's certainly,
It's not like super crystal clear.
it may not be, but it's also not exactly our jurisdiction. I mean,
It's a set fire code.
it's a fire.
See rates.
We're not going to write those numbers into our ordinance anyway. We're just saying they have to follow it.
Okay, keep going. Sorry, David.
I've got a couple more. I'd like to know what the logic was and how you determined seated dining at 135 and cocktails at 200 plus staff. But I've never heard these numbers before, and I was wondering what the genesis and logic was.
When one of the events that we evaluated was a cocktail party that had about 200 people in attendance. We observed from various locations around the property and adjacent to neighbors, and it was our observation that the impact was very limited. We've thought for that kind of an event, the 200 number was probably okay.
The sound data supported
Right.
that as well.
Yeah. When we looked at, when the event had a different nature, when it was a ceremony and party that had seated dining, it typically has a dance floor that's inside and maybe music being played inside, the impacts are bigger. Those events go later, the residents drink more, and the potential for impacts is higher. And for that reason, we limited it to 135. The number is a combination, both trying to limit the number of people that are in attendance at an event like that, but also matching it to the capacity of the room if you had a dance floor. And it effectively precludes the use, that number effectively precludes the use of the outdoor patio, the outdoor courtyard for seated dining. So it was consistent with where we were headed in the spring when we were talking about allowing outdoor dining only on the veranda.
So when we looked at the garden rooms, the capacity there was 89. And then if we wanted to allow 24 people outdoors, which is 3 tables, which is the fire code for the terrace and veranda, that got us up to about 113. And then we looked at the ballroom and said, well, you know, and some of our conversations with Meg, she was like, well, sometimes we can put a few tables in the ballroom and then, you know, either keep them there or tear them down for the dancing. So we added 3 more tables, and that's how we got to the 135. Also, we had heard from people who had had weddings there or who had talked back when New York Foods was there, and they had been told previously, I think the range that was allowed was, I think it was like 130 to 140 or something like that. And then we also looked at other venues to see what kind of numbers they were restricting, such as Catalina View Gardens, I can't remember, you know, Greystone Mansion, just other ones that were in residential areas. We also, though, as part of this, I recall in one of the meetings, maybe the September meeting, the site manager had said the average wedding size was 106. And then some data that was shared to us by some residents from the ABC Liquor License Board. Also showed an average of 106, so it felt like a reasonable number.
But you kind of said in your example that when you went to see the event that was kind of a good, successful event, that was about 140 people. So why would you come in less?
Well, first, I want to emphasize that this is not necessarily the recommendation. We're not bringing this to you as our recommendation. We are bringing this to you as draft terms that we want to input into a public process. So do keep in mind that all of this is subject to change. But the 135 was essentially, it was really based, I mean, at one point we literally had the map out and we said, okay, well, if you put tables, if you filled the various interior rooms to their capacity, you stuck 2 tables in the room where they typically have a dance floor, and you allowed seated dining on the veranda to the capacity of the fire department, then you end up with 135.
The other piece of it is both the residents and Meg commented on that being a unusual wedding. And kind of a, we talked with the residents from a sound standpoint as, if that were that's kind of like the standard. If it were always like that, then everything would be fine.
Sorry, David, did I interrupt you?
I just remind folks, though, that we can take public comment and bring this back for discussion if you have questions right now.
I'd suggest you go to public comment, and we'll come back and discuss it.
That's a really good idea.
Okay. All right, we'll start with public comment. I do have a number of cards here, so I will ask folks to keep it to 3 minutes, and I will let you know when you hit that time limit, and please don't be offended. We'll start with Mr. Gene Rogers. After Mr. Rogers will be Mark Matthews.
Hi, Gene Rogers, homeowner, 556 Via Del Monte. For anyone driving into our city from the South Bay, one of the first of many beautiful sights they see is the iconic profile of La Venta Inn, defining the skyline of PV Estates. It's also one of the most historical. My wife Kathy and I tenderly recall being there at wedding receptions and other festivities dating back fully 60 years ago. Let me tell you that good times back then and even earlier were a lot more raucous than what we see today. Long before any of the current neighbors moved into their homes and before most of them were even born. Now, Meg is continuing her effort to bring order and moderation to whatever gets scheduled there. PVE has an archaic and pretty much subjective system today of enforcing all types of events. We've had gatherings at our home that were shut down by PVE PD before it was even dark. They told us a neighbor complained they could hear you. Now, here at Via Del Monte, I can distinctly hear Little League games going on at Mollig Elementary. Not just the crack of the bat, but shouts from proud parents and coaches urging their kids to hustle it up. Does that mean I should ask PVE PD to shut down their game? I don't think so. Because they're using that property just as it was intended to be used, just as I used my home as intended, and Meg is using La Venta as it was intended. I'm certain of that, because some years ago I was fortunate enough to share a conversation with Dory Matthews, who grew up in that home when it was a residence. She loved all the events and would love what Meg is accomplishing there now. So the modern approach for La Venta and across our city is to set an objective standard for noise, not let the grumpiest neighbor decide when the party is over for everyone. Most cities do that today along the lines of what you've just been discussing by establishing a fixed sound decibel limit that can be measured to determine objectively when an event is overly loud. As a physicist, 52 dB is a very low number. I just happened to look that up because you mentioned it. It's equivalent to a quiet conversation, a quiet office, or a quiet refrigerator. Also, the system of measuring typically in sound has at least 2 approaches to dBA. That is, instantaneous, and over time, root mean square, RMS. And you didn't distinguish that, but I would certainly suggest that RMS is a more appropriate approach in as much as spikes are always present in virtually any event that is likely to go more than a quiet refrigerator. Finally, limiting the events to, as discussed in the report, to no more than 2 consecutive nights is really a way to drive the facility out of business entirely. If they're going to have an operational business, they need to have proper limits and countermeasures, but they should be able to operate as often as they can to serve their clients. Forcing them to close.
Mayor, that's time.
Oh, sorry, time, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And I'll leave a
No, it's
written
okay.
copy of my comments for the file.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Matthews. Thanks. I thought you were bringing back the gong.
Sorry.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Congratulations to Victoria Lozzi, Michael Kemp, and David McGowan on your November re-election. Councilwoman Murdoch, that's not accurate that the activities of 2019 were less than what they are now. The activity at Lavena has not increased, it's decreased, and Meg's been trying to get her business up and running in the past year, and to look at what her venue manager said was the average, or to ask the ABC what the average is. Why don't we give her a year or two to see what she can do, not take her first 18 months and go, well, that's the average. We originally agreed to curtail outdoor activities by 8:30 on weekdays, 9:30 on weekends. We did that because Michael Kemps came to me and said, can't we do something about this ordinance that just says you can operate within the building only? Well, we can operate within the existing building only. The 1848 code was written to protect the building, because even in 1948, that city council understood that Lavena was iconic. It was the most recognizable building in Palos Verdes. They didn't want somebody tearing it down and building a bigger hotel or a bigger restaurant. They wanted it within the building only, not that you couldn't use the outdoor space. But we're sensitive to the neighbors. We agreed to cut back the hours. We agreed to cut back our hours from 11 o'clock closing to 10 o'clock. We agreed to scale down the number of guests from the fire marshal's 300 to 200 maximum. By the way, you can put a lot more tables in that dining room. You can just shuffle the tables after the dance floor. You don't need a dance floor up all the time, especially if, like me, you're not that good a dancer. This past October, we did do sound monitoring over a 10-day period. The report came back stating that the vast majority of the loudest noises came not from Lavena, but from ambient sources. And now, 18 months later, we are still in this process, but the goalposts have moved again. We're now not trying to deal with sound and traffic. We are talking about running a business, and running a business into the ground. Lavena's 2 previous tenants, the only 2 that we've had in the last 56 years, have both gone on the record to say that these proposed restrictions that you're putting forward would strangle Lavena. No other business in the city has ever been subject to this level of detailed micromanagement that is now being proposed. It is not only unfair, but I believe it's inappropriate and wrong. And I urge the council to listen not just to the 30 or so opponents, but to the over 200 residents who have expressed their support for Lavena. This 100-year-old business was there before anyone else moved in. We've agreed to the bans. We cannot agree to running this business out.
Next up, I have John Williams. And after Mr. Williams, we will have Jim Parker.
Mayor Roos, Mayor Pro Tem Murdoch, council members, city staff, good evening. My name is John Williams, and I live in Monte Malaga in a home I purchased 40 years ago. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this subject. I know you have put a lot of work into it, trying to find a compromise satisfactory to all parties. My purpose in speaking, however, is to ask that the City Council not approve the motion to proceed. And I understand from your comments, Mayor Roos, that may not have exactly been the item you thought was agenda tonight, but I have two reasons for this recommendation. I would like to add that I first raised these concerns at the Planning Commission meeting of January 18, 2022, 51 weeks ago, which was the first time that the changes were discussed in public. The proposed changes result from an email in July 2021 from the operator to the city manager. They decided that changes to the municipal code were required and went to work. However, Chapter 1728 of the municipal code states that there are one of three ways to initiate such a change: a resolution by either the Planning Commission or the City Council, or a formal application by the resident. None of these is reflected in the public record. So the code modification process has not been properly authorized. This is not late-breaking news. It was discussed in meetings of the Planning Commission. My second reason to oppose the motion is that the city staff determination that code modifications are required are, in my opinion, incorrect. The current municipal code provides adequate means for the city to control La Venta activities, so a code modification is not required to support city interest. If, however, the owner-operator requires some relief from code restrictions, then that relief is properly obtained with the application mentioned previously. Accordingly, the current code revision process puts the cart before the horse, selecting a solution without identifying a problem, and will almost certainly create problems, not solve them. My recommendation is that the city consider how and to what extent La Venta complies with current ordinances and apply any course corrections warranted after determining what the problem is. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Parker, and then after Jim, we will have Bob Gracer.
Reasonable persons would view the incessant hosting of large-scale social events for a fee in the middle of a quiet residential neighborhood as unreasonable due to the large-scale negative impacts suffered by the neighborhood for the sole benefits of the defendants. Those are the exact words used by the city to get an injunction to stop the weddings at 605 Paseo del Mar. Does that ring a bell? That's exactly what is happening at La Venta. And you're abusing your power and attempting to change very good laws and change those laws to allow it to even get worse. It's R1 property. If the owner and the operator want to make money and earn a profit from it, let them obey the laws. There's nothing wrong with the laws. Yes, La Venta is the first building, but we all know that it was built to sell the property. All the property's been sold a long time ago, and now they want to disturb him. It's not okay. It's a 4-room, 4,000 square foot building. They want to make mega bucks out of it. 200 people, unlimited drinking. Just put yourself in our position, as if maybe you lived in Joe DeSanto's house. I don't think you'd be acting the way you are. How many restrooms does it have? Over 200 people with the employees? I think there's only 2 or 3 restrooms. It just doesn't make sense. People ask me, why is the city allowing that? I don't have an answer. I watched a promotional little blurb on one of the local channels, and they were interviewing Meg, and she said they were talking about the fountain, and she called it the voice of La Venta. Well, that fountain is not the voice of La Venta. It's the party howling and the loud music and the cheering, and that's the voice of La Venta. So please rethink what you're doing.
Thank you, sir. And after Mr. Gracer, we have Sandra Damiani, and then Darcel Ramirez-Hampson after that.
Honorable council members, Mayor Roos, city staff, thank you for permitting me to speak this evening. I'd like to offer some context on the La Venta topic from a historical preservation standpoint. It occurs to me that in Palos Verdes Estates, we never experienced the loss of a significant public space and the associated institution. The original Plaza Building, the golf club, the swim club, La Venta Inn, they're all extant and serving the community. Very few cities can make this claim. Perhaps Santa Barbara, Carmel, that's about it. Just to our north, Redondo Beach has experienced catastrophic losses, including the hotel, the auditorium, the casino, the bathhouse, the Fox Theater, and the Hollywood Riviera Beach Club. One has to search hard for traces of Redondo's history. When a community hasn't experienced a loss, it can become complacent. This was the case with New York City and the destruction of the Pennsylvania Railroad Station. There were articles in the news and comments here and there, but for the most part, New Yorkers just sleepwalked through, and then came the shock. That event marked a turning point in historic preservation, and within a few years, the National Register of Historic Places was established by the Congress to help protect such treasures. La Venta is not on the register and has no protection from the wrecking ball. I've seen the ad hoc committee's recommendations for restricting La Venta's operations, including reduced seating capacities, limits on the number of events per week, limits on more than one event per day, and early closures on Sunday. I believe these conditions would cripple La Venta and render it economically unviable. I implore our city to maintain the existing operating parameters so that La Venta can continue to thrive and serve our community now and for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sandra Damiani.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for giving us a chance to speak, and also thank you for forming this ad hoc committee to discuss these issues. Looking over the draft, we did have a little discussion with our group, the Keep PV Quiet group, and there were some issues that we were wondering about, which I just took some notes, but in terms of the 52 decibel limit, after only measuring that after 8:30 p.m., but that's when the events are going indoors, so we had a question about also measuring it before 8:30 p.m. Also a question about whether the special event, or there was not a mention of special event permits addressed in the draft. I'm sorry, I live at 812 Via Del Monte. I just jotted down some notes. I didn't really prepare something formal, but historically, I guess there have not been limitations placed on La Venta, but I don't feel that's, a reason just because in the past there were no limitations and then now there should continue to be no limitations. So that just doesn't make sense. And this, the land that it's on is zone residential. So as, a resident, we would like to have some peace and quiet. Another item on the draft was it seems to be that basically the event frequency does not, Oh, okay, events of 75 plus cannot occur more than 2 days in a row. But it seems like they could basically have events every day, except no events on the 4 holidays that were listed. So that seems excessive to me. Just going back to that decibel limit, I was just going to give an example of last summer there was an event, I believe it was an Indian wedding that was quite loud in the late afternoon that many of the neighbors heard, and that was definitely before 8:30 when you would be doing the monitoring. And then also going back to my point about the unlimited events, I believe that the neighborhood church as well as Catalina Islands have more limitation on the number of events. I think in one of my previous meetings, or somebody had mentioned limitation to, for example, 35 events at Catalina Gardens. Just some of the points that I was wondering about. Thank you.
Thank you. And before, Ms. Ramirez-Hampson, you're up next, and before you come up to the microphone, I'll just address quickly some of Ms. Damiani's questions. With respect to the wedding that you observed, where there was the drum, we actually feel that particular case is covered with our by the fact that we have chosen to foreclose the use of percussive instruments on the property, so you wouldn't be able to play a drum. And there's also no, except in the case of a ceremony, there's no amplified music outside, and the amplification is limited to string instruments. And there's other things that are in there besides that are intended to mitigate some of those concerns. But you're right. We did right now the working option is the decibel limit only applies after 8:30 p.m. The special event permits, our assumption is special event permits continue to be available to the owner, and they can apply for them just like anyone else. And your interpretation of the frequency that events could happen every day is accurate. And anything else you'd add? No? Okay. And Ms. Ramirez-Hampson. And then Bobby Aiken after that.
Good evening, and thank you, and Happy New Year, and welcome, Mayor Roos. I'd like to just have a theme to put into our consciousness here, and that is of reasonability. You've heard one thing quoted already from what was our own city council's decision that we litigated for and residents paid for. It is now being undone. So I'd just like to read to you the resident handbook and what it states to remind you of what needs to be foundational for anyone that's on the city council. Quote, "It is the intent of the city to preserve residential zones in the city for residential purposes and not to encourage or approve the operation of commercial businesses in any residential zone." So, while I certainly appreciate the effort that you're giving to detail, Council members Murdoch and Roos, it doesn't make sense. Our handbook lays out what that R1 is intended to remain. People are paying a lot of taxes. So let's just, for a moment, turn it over to what has Meg's Catering in 18 months provided to our city revenue coffers that warrant our taxpayers, who I'm certain pay over $30,000 or near a year, lose police intervention when a special event permit is issued. We lose your representation because you're trying to create a way around our credo, our city credo. It is the intent of the city to preserve residential zones in the city for residential purposes and not encourage or approve the operation of commercial businesses in any residential zone. I failed to mention that Meg's Catering provided under $1,200. And at best, with the arrangement, and I don't know who negotiated it, it's a terrible return for us. If Meg's Catering makes $2.5 million, we get 1% of 10% of that. That means, at best, we're getting $2,500 a year. I'm sorry, Mr. Matthews.
That's
Mr. Ramirez, or Ms. Ramirez-Sampson, your time's up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bobby Aiken.
Thank you all so much. Bobby Aiken, 801. Where the hell do I live? Via Caneo. Happy New Year, everybody. Again, I so respect what you do and appreciate all your work. I know this has been a heck of a process, and I know that you're trying to find a path forward through this process that is not easy. I think I want to respect that there's a process here. There's going to be a lot of input from residents, and then we're really going to kind of get down to what it's going to be. But whatever that is, I would implore you to not take that and put it into the code right away. I think we need to reverse that process a little bit, and I don't want to kick the can down the road or kick it down the road again. We've been at this too long. But whatever the rules are, let's do some sort of trial period for 6 months during La Venta's busiest time, and take that after that 6 months and say, okay, what's working for the residents or not working? What's working for La Venta or not working? And then put it into code, because it is and I'm not an expert on this, but it is my assumption that once it's in the code for either side, it's going to be much harder to change it once it's in there. We can say there's reviews and we can say all those things, but my assumption is once it's in there and it's harder to deal with. I think we take whatever this period is after the public comment, come back and say, all right, this is what we're doing for 6 months. And then we have one more bite at the apple, and then you guys can do what you need to do to put it in the code or whatever. And that's all I got to say. I just thank you. You guys put in a ton of work, and I know there's more to be done, but I appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you, sir. And last, Joe DeSanto.
Good evening, council and staff. Thank you for the opportunity. I just want to, I guess, focus on a couple of items. I know there's going to be more input on the details. In regard to what's been brought up about the 605 Paseo Del Mar situation where the city went in and obtained an injunction, in that case, they actually deemed that activity and those impacts as a public nuisance, and the court did agree. And this was based on an average of one event per month with about 70 people in attendance. So they took it very seriously, and it was a small fraction of the normal event frequency at La Venta. There were 2 resident declarations included, and they make a lot of the same complaints that you probably heard at the meeting for the residents out 1,000 feet. One of them stated that the rear of my property, which faces the Pacific Ocean, has been fitted with glass lanai sliding doors. The purpose of this style of door is to open seamlessly, leaving an unobstructed opening from the interior of the house to the rear yard. Due to the frequency of the events held on the property, as well as the noise generated therefrom, I have been unable to enjoy this feature of my home in some time. So this resident was just pushed back into their home by these same impacts once a month. The other declaration said, additionally, due to the number of persons in attendance as well as the lively nature of these events, there is a large volume of noise. Instead of enjoying the peaceful tranquility of the Pacific Ocean, my family and I endure the sounds of amplified music, raucous talking and laughter, and/or diesel engines, metal clanging, and backup alarms. So you've all heard these same impacts. Speaking to residents before, one of the obvious differences, we're talking about 250 times a year. In the neighborhood where La Venta is located, this was 12 times a year, and 70 people, not 200. So that needs to be considered because it's of city origin. Only 6 years ago, the city took this action. Secondly, I would like to see the general plan noise ordinance posted on any of the websites that are meant to provide information to interested members of the public. It's about 15 pages, and it's a foundational document.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeSanto. All right, that concludes the cards that I have, so we'll bring it back up to the council for discussion. I will make the point, there is no action request of the council. This is, so we can discuss it. We'd love, I think, Councilmember Murdoch and I would love to get your feedback.
Well, when you say no, there is an action, it's just not, it's not decisions on an ordinance or terms. The action is to approve a public engagement period.
Okay. So there's that much.
Maybe we should start with that since that's the action we're trying to head to.
Well, I think before we do that, I wanted to ask if there was anything in here that anyone sees as a showstopper. Are you particularly concerned about any of the items that are on here? Are you comfortable with us proceeding with these as the basis for the public engagement?
No, lots of problems that there's issues with, I think. Yeah, I mean, I'll just...
This is your opportunity. Give us that feedback.
Okay, so I think the 135 is too low. It's not what we've discussed all along, and...
What do you like?
We, we talked about, I know that the operator would like 200. I think I've said before in public comment that, the operator wants 200 and the residents want 75. But I still think something like, 150. And if the operator is wanting to have events bigger than that, they need to come back to us with a special event permit. I mean, I think that, we would have, I don't know where in our minds, somewhere written down, there's probably some appetite for some number of large events per year. Is that 5? I don't know. But I think 135 is just a prohibitively, I have parties for 135 at my house. So, that just seems too low. That's just prohibitive. It just is a recipe for disaster for the operator, I think. I'll go through some of these maybe quickly. We don't have to talk about every single one. But in general, 2 pages of a list of items, I think is micromanaging. I don't think we are in the business of running an event place. I just don't think this is our purview. I think we have to set strategic, kind of strategic vision or limits, or, maybe we do that through a code, obviously, in the ZTA, but we have to, I think we have to set direction, and then we have to let people operate, and then we have to enforce that, and we have to monitor it. But, events, I'm sorry, is someone talking? Oh, sorry, I think there's talking in the back of the room, thanks. So, events, not more than 75 people, 2 days in a row, that just seems micromanaging. I don't know if that's smart or not smart. I will say, I recognize if you live next door somewhere, you don't want to party every single day. I do recognize that. But the, one event per day, except Saturdays in June, July, and August, I mean, this is like nitpicky stuff. I understand, it sounds like everybody's agreed to the timing. Personally, I think at 8:30 in the summer, it's still light out, so wouldn't you want to stand outside? But okay, everybody's kind of agreed to that, so I'm going to leave that alone. You can start an event at 9, but you can't set up before 9. I mean, to me, that again, nitpicky. The shuttle thing, that to me, recipe for disaster, just because I think there was some other, somewhere along the line, obviously we have a whole notebook of La Venta here, but, someone I think said, oh, people have to shuttle in. I'm like, well, where are you going to park this shuttle? Oh, we'll park the shuttle in Malaga Cove Plaza. I'm like, that's a difference. That creates, that's just a different problem. So,
They use shuttles now. They usually are coming from hotels.
Somewhere else, okay. The parking, I probably appreciate what you were trying to do with the Traffic Safety Committee, but, maybe that's a way to elicit more input, but, that's just kicking this whole can. The parking is a big component of this, and you're just kicking the can down the road to send it to a committee. Okay, so I need to speak with that. You're rebutting every single thing I say, please.
That's fine.
Thank you. So I think that the outdoor activity, like a lot of this, although you did explain to one of the speakers, so I did appreciate that when because I was like, we are not in the business of dictating, okay, you can have a harp and you can have a string quartet, but you can't have a flute. But I understand you're trying to get away from drums and, that I didn't know. So I did, you said that, so I did appreciate that. Again, kind of nitpicking. I wrote a note to myself saying, you after 8:30, you must have a door attendant, and I said, no fun outside. It's kind of, it's a lot, and and this is not, well, I should have prefaced it. I know you guys worked really hard on this, and I feel like, we've been working for, 2 years on this, and so it's not easy. I totally recognize that. I think that for me, and I think Ms. Hanson made the point that I've been making all along, which is there's some significant inconvenience to a section of our residents, and we need to be compensated for that. And so the business license and sales tax revenue and business revenue must come to this city, and we have to be compensated for that.
Please hold your applause. Thank you.
So I've said that all along, so I see you have that here. So I wrote a big yes underline, so that was good. And I think that if you look back at the last couple years, I tried to look back at all the minutes. You have to kind of, these are so long, they go on for so long, you have to refresh your memory a lot. We really do, it does come down to enforcement. It comes down to, I'll just point to this corner, if we say, okay, here's the rules, and if the operators if they break the rules, then what's your recourse? Where do you go? Who do you call? And all it says is PVEPD and PVE code enforcement will both be responsible for enforcement, where to me, that's a huge issue, is who do I call? Can I call someone the night of the event, or do I not have that option? And, code enforcement implies an after the fact. That doesn't help you that day, right? And, so to me, enforcement is a huge issue, and it's one sentence at the bottom of the laundry list. I think that, I don't know if you guys have been following it, but, and maybe this is just very extreme, and it's maybe extreme example, and would never happen in our town, but there was another venue in Manhattan Beach that New York Food operated. Verandas. And when New York Food went out of business, those owners sold that property and the property next door, and now there's developers, the state, the state housing commission are all in a fight about putting 70 apartment units and low-income housing on that lot. We have to make this viable for the people who operate this. I know I'm going back and forth on the argument, but because it is a circular argument. it's the first building. It's iconic. It's beautiful. I love somebody, Mr. Williams, maybe somebody sent pictures. You love to look at the pictures from 1925 wedding, and you know the evolution, and yeah. But the flip is you get to sit in your backyard in the summer without a lot of noise. So so it probably wasn't any conclusions, but and I guess my last thing, sorry, you guys, going on is, and the reason I was asking about how many houses are we talking about and what was your notice period? I guess I don't, so you're asking for the go-ahead to start this public outreach. I mean, I feel like we've had 2 years of public comment on this. You held a public, you noticed a meeting, you sent out postcards to every household, 20 people showed up. I don't really understand the point of re-noticing the same households to get the same 20 people to come on something that's just going to take a long time. I mean, I guess it's no skin off our nose if it's really February 1st, but I mean, are we going to keep dragging this out for the same 20 people? I think I don't know. I mean, you can see how many people came tonight, a dozen, so I know, sorry. Okay, that's it. It's so fun to not be mayor and say what you think. This is a great chair over here. So anyway,
just to provide some response to that, this is more detailed than I thought we were going to end up. We didn't go into that. If you look at the agreement between the city and Catalina View Gardens, which is 30-some pages, it's much more detailed, much more nitty-gritty. It's the same with the neighborhood church. So, and if you look at other cities' noise ordinances, they are pages and pages long as opposed to our little 2 paragraphs. And so you might call it nitty-gritty, picky, detailed, but our experience was based on the things that we were seeing going on that residents felt were the genesis of the noise. That's why we ended up putting them in the terms, because we were trying to identify the irritants and to regulate them.
no, totally appreciate that. No, I know, it's not easy.
Mayor, I just we did get the number. It was 219.
219 homes that were noticed. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Ready?
Council members? Yes.
First of all, absolutely grateful for the amount of time that you spent, for giving your cell phone numbers out, for being responsive to residents, for collaborating. So thank you for all of your time, and sorry for the raspy voice. For me, let's go back to 50,000 feet for a minute. We formed the ad hoc with the intent of hoping to bring the sides together. It is very clear to me that that has not occurred. It's very clear to me that the, I'll call it the La Venta side, doesn't want this. It's very clear to me that the residents that are most concerned don't want it or are not satisfied, either with how far you've gone or how far you haven't gone. And we are in effect, and I'm happy and I'm willing to do this, but we are in effect being forced to be the bad guy, to Mr. Williams' point, without an application, number one. And in a sense, it was internally formed, and some of that occurred honestly when I was sorry for the revamp of history here, but some of that occurred when Meg arrived on the scene and we were getting through COVID, and I won't name names. A couple residents reached out to the city manager and the community development director at the time. I was mayor, and I think with the best of intent, she said, well, look, the code currently says it can operate, very limited, capacity, and if you have concerns, that there's no way to address that unless we go and modify the existing zoning text that's here. So on the one side, to Ms. Hampson's point, protect the neighborhood. And throughout this whole thing, prior to the creation of the ad hoc and to this moment, I side a little bit on the neighborhood side of this thing for that exact reason, to protect that residential nature. The fact is, it is in the existing zoning text. So just thinking about this holistically, I struggle with us ramming both sides of this together and forcing a solution and shoving it down their throat, despite the fact that you two have done all this work, because both sides are screaming, we don't want this in its present form. What I had hoped would happen was that you would be able to successfully bring both sides together, and I humbly say knock heads, so that everyone could get on the same page. And it feels like the road we're headed down has both sides screaming no, and I'm not sure what to do with that. I'm not sure whether that's a professional mediator. I'm not sure, certainly look, on the resident side, we're not going to just tell Leventa to stop operating. They've been operating since before the city was incorporated. The flip side is there is more density, there are more residents, yes, they've changed, all those things. So, I think we all respected the history, and we don't want to put, I think this is true for 5. We don't want, I'm going to look right at you, Mark, we don't want Leventa to go out of business. That was not the driving factor of this. And the flip side is, I'm not the one getting the calls, Don and Jim are, I've gotten a couple, but there have been some pretty significant events that have occurred, and frankly, they weren't well managed, and then, they blew up. So I think in a public engagement process, rather than continuing to have the sides continuing to stake their, stakes in the ground and say, no, damn it, I want it this way, what I had hoped that would come from this was a meeting of the minds and bringing people together. And if, in fact, what we're doing is pushing people further apart, maybe we just walk away. I'm not actually suggesting it at this point. But why should we, to the point of no revenue, put the city in a situation where we're forcing people together that don't want it, where we're lining ourselves and you up for lawsuits that we don't need to expend? And by the way, we have a hell of a lot to do. Wait till you hear the work plan. We don't need this crap. So let's pull people together and work together and solve problems and be reasonable. For me, going to a few of the points, the neighborhood desire that it, be 100% locked down with the doors locked, not locked, but with the doors closed, with everything operating within the building, and then starting to amass the number of days that it can operate, not more than, X number of in a row and certain hours. And oh, by the way, now that we've done all that, let's also put sound limitations on. Let's get real, we're approaching putting them out of business. And then we're going to launch up some beautiful homes there. Well, maybe I should invest in that and get off the council. Just kidding. It was a joke. We have to be reasonable, collaborative adults on this and try and solve this together. Some people have said to me separately, well, you know what? Go get a third independent sound engineer that's not biased towards one of them. I'm not saying they are, Mark. I see you looking at me. That's not biased towards one side or the other, and come up with a solution that, measures one form of dB or another that's measured within X number of minutes, and just, damn it, agree and move on. I did like the idea of trying this for X number of months without formalizing it into the code. I think that was a great suggestion. So, maybe this process can end up with that suggestion. We're neighbors. We live in Palos Verdes Estates. This is one of the most beautiful cities in the country. We need to collaborate together and solve this problem so that we can continue to be neighbors, and so that whoever the operator is of that business that has existed in one form or another for nearly 100 years can continue to operate. That's how I see it. I appreciate your work. I'm not sure exactly how to solve it, but I'm concerned that we're ramming both sides together and it's going to blow up.
I have some comments quickly. Thank you both for your speeches. I want to tell you something about, I spent 2 years on the Planning Commission, and at a Planning Commission meeting on every single item, there's a room just like this. 10, 12 people show up. Half of them have one opinion, half of them have the other. Never once did I hear a planning commissioner get up and say, the problem is we need to all find middle ground. Our role here is to govern, and we came up with a very detailed list. Everything on it we put on that list because it mitigated a specific impact. I wasn't asked, I was given a list of grievances and told not to respond to them. So you won't know why. The public maybe will find out. But A considerable amount of effort went into this. We would, at no point did we say, let's take a poll, figure out what everyone thinks, and then decide to just do that. That's not our goal. My goal is not to make everyone in this room happy. We're not going to do that. We're going to govern. We're going to come up with something that mitigates the impacts to the neighbors and that allows the operator to make money and preserves the facility.
But this list doesn't govern and lead, it micromanages, I think, is our issue. And so let's, I mean.
I understand you haven't
No,
been
you're
recognized.
upset.
And I have the
Yes, sir.
opportunity to have the floor, because I'm going to agree with some of my colleagues here on their comments. I think my first read or second and third read of this draft micromanage is exactly one of the words I wrote down. I don't think we are in that business or should be in that business. I have said for a number of months right now, trying to manage this thing by the head counts or the number of attendees back and forth, I don't believe is the right answer. I think what we really need to do is, I support all the work that you guys have done, and I think that's been tremendous, and I would encourage us to go forward with a public comment period. But I would also encourage, on a parallel path, we instruct our city manager to identify 2 or 3 sound engineers that can be retained by the city so that we are able to get professional expertise. I'm sure as the last person in the world to know whether it should be a 52.1 of whatever decibel or some other number. We need some professional guidance. And what comes to my mind is a venue up in Griffith Park called the Greek Theater, thank you, which is in a residential neighborhood. And I want to go back to find out who their sound engineers are that work with the Los Angeles County, or the City of Los Angeles Parks Group, and looking at sound engineering from that perspective. And there probably are other similar kind of venues, but that one is familiar to me. I think what we need is to manage this thing on a sound level with some teeth in it that would give us the ability for enforcement. If a particular event gets out of control, they can pick up the phone and call our PD, and PD can go up there and they'll have, at least if we establish some criteria for them to monitor against. I don't want to get into the business of micromanaging LaVenta or the catering operations. I think there's some other inconsistencies that I see in this document. I know there's been a talk about, parking on the streets and what hours you could, if it doesn't open until 9 in the morning, you can't, they may have to move cars around or close down early. And I think there's some inconsistencies that need to be worked out there. But my...
You have specifics.
I'm sorry?
If you have specifics, you should share them now, because you can't share them
Well,
after
I
this
think
meeting.
one of the specifics is, as the cleanup crew has to park in the street, if I am doing this from memory right now, the cleanup crew has to park in the street, and they would have to be off the street by 10 o'clock when they're trying to vacate the parking lot in order, so they can finish the cleanup. They'd have to go out and move cars back and forth. I think we have to look at the logistical nature of that. To me, it just sounds a little bit convoluted. But my biggest issue is, I don't know whether, I am really seriously questioning whether we want to manage this thing by a head count issue versus a sound. Because I can get 100 of my best friends, and I could go up to rent the facility, and we could break the sound decibels if we wanted to. I could probably do it with less than 100. And I could also be up there for a function of 200 or 200 plus people and not break any decibel records. So I think we're maybe looking at the wrong yardstick in order to be managing this situation. But I am very much concerned that if we were to adopt all of these recommendations, even though you've got a lot of rationale and background to put into this thing, that we are opening ourselves up for more problems than we're going to be resolving.
So let me address a couple of your points, and I think that you've made some decent ones. I do think that there's a lot of complexity here. But I want to remind you, I'll give you an example. You remember when we worked on the issue of the trail ride operator at...
Yes.
Okay. And when the Rolling Hills Estate staff came to us and said, look, this is having a big impact on our neighbors, this business is growing bigger than I think you probably anticipated, we propose what? They didn't say, it wasn't simple. They wanted screening for the lights. They wanted the number of events to be limited. They wanted the timing of the events to be limited. They wanted the number of participants eliminated. They wanted to know where those people were authorized to park. All of that stuff is part of this process. And I know that this group isn't necessarily used to this kind of work, but this is pretty typical. I'm sorry, go ahead.
The other thing I want to add is it's very typical for event venues to put a restriction on the head count.
Oh, I understand that.
I looked at, Catalina View Kitchens, 135. Villa Sancti, 150. Greystone, 150. That's what they do. They figure out what's the capacity, and they do it within the constraints of any kind of noise in residential areas, and they put on their website, we are strictly enforced according to city code.
I think David's
And
on the right.
That's in Malibu and other cities.
Well, I think you're both on the right track. I think, David, because as you were speaking and you say, okay, we got to measure the sound, I'm like, well, okay, but you wouldn't know until the people were in. Like you said, is this 100 people that are really loud or really quiet? Right. So I think to your point, Don, it is probably groups of this size, and maybe that's where it's back to your expert, maybe, or, a consultant or somebody
that knows
who
what they're
says,
doing.
okay, a group this size generally generates this much noise. A group this size generally, I think it does. I think it comes down to head count.
I don't think a sound guy can tell you that, because a group of, it just depends on who the crowd is, because you're right.
Well, they would have some, I'm assuming they'd have some sampling of all the venues you mentioned, for example. I think it does come down to head count. I think practically speaking, you're going to have to figure out the head count generates the
bottom
noise
line, it's got to
and
come
the parking.
back, I think, to the manager of the facility to manage the sound level, whatever that yardstick is. And they've got to be very aggressive in telling their clients in advance. I like your ideas of giving them all the ordinances and all the parameters that they're going to have to operate under. But if they tip that decibel level, whatever it might be, the manager is going to have to shut it down. Let them manage the facility, not the city council, and let them manage the type of events, because, as we said, we could have a group of 50 fraternity brothers of mine get up there and we could break the sound decibel.
So,
really,
I believe it.
And I think that would be a great outcome. The problem is, it hasn't worked for the past 9 months for the residents, to not micromanage, to set general guidelines.
But we don't micromanage the golf club. We don't ask them to send in a
Golf club's on the
listing of
move.
all the events that are going to happen in the next number of weeks.
Are residents complaining about them? Catalina View Gardens has to submit a log. The neighborhood church has to submit a log.
Well, I'm not aware of that, but
Another thing, just to provide some color around the discussion that Dawn and I have been having about decibel limits, because it is, I mentioned when we were discussing this in the spring, I'm not really a fan of it at all. And, we could potentially hire someone to give us recommendations, but at the end of the day, we have to understand them to be able to put them into effect. I mean, if we're not going to outsource our job to a sound engineer, right? We have to make the decision about what things we want to control.
we need something credible that we can rely upon to make that judgment.
Right, and the problem, the challenge that I have, and the reason that I opposed it, and really I still do, and why we ended up with this kind of hobbled one that only starts at 8:30, is because it's just, I see it as a quagmire. The science of measuring sound is probably perfectly predictable in a laboratory, but outside, it doesn't have the same effect. The location of these will affect, how loud, what they pick up, the growth of vegetation, the trimming of vegetation, the location of event tents, all those things are going to change the decibel reading, the wind blowing, a plane going overhead, a bunch of cars, a bunch of motorcycles going up the street. It's such a quagmire. And then it puts the onus on police officers who presumably then are out there with decibel meters, breaking up meetings. That's why we're talking about the code enforcement officer, because we've focused on putting very discrete, actionable, easily identifiable limits on their use. And a violation of that comes with, ultimately, a very substantial penalty. And that penalty is a civil penalty put in place, or, enforced by the code enforcement officer, and that's the process, rather than police officers out there with decibel readers trying to decide whether they need to, end a party.
Yeah, but if we had the decibel monitors, there would be a historical record that could be utilized by the officers or code enforcement or whomever to determine whether in fact this was a 1 minute situation, or is it a prolonged
You know where that actually has some value? One of the speakers, kind of talked about like, okay, fine, you're measuring decibel levels after 8:30. Well, that's when the thing moves inside. Because, you could have some wildly loud party at 4 in the afternoon and the decibels then say, okay, you're there, take it inside. Even if it's 4 o'clock, so it says something, when your party hits this noise level, it's going inside regardless of the time. Maybe that's how you.
Well, I think we're dealing in an area that we don't have the expertise in, and we need to. I
think we need help.
We have to have a professional expert provide some guidance to us.
The tricky part about that is 2 experts have already weighed in on this. And I realize they're affiliated with a side, but my concern is, will a 3rd expert give you the same answer as the 4th expert and the 5th expert, or do we do as many of the residents have talked about and do a trial period of this, see what the measurements are, shoot for the 52, and then see if that's correct? Because so much of it depends on ambient noise. It just so happens that when the last study was done, Mettawara had a bunch of cement trucks going up, and SCE was doing a lot of work at Gaddle's place. So you're never going to get as the laboratory that Jim's talking about that's going to.
My point is, I think we need to do both. I think we need the third party, we need the city's sound engineer as an independent, unbiased person that is retained by the city. Whatever we end up coming up with, I fully subscribe to a 6-month trial, and we let, because both sides are going to complain about the third party. That's one of the reasons we have 3 arbitrators in most arbitration situations.
Dave, what are you going to do, though, when they come back with their decibel limit and the city attorney drafts an ordinance and these same people show up and both of them say they don't like it? And that, because at the end of the day, my feeling is at least a couple folks up here are trying to find someone else to do this difficult job. And it's our responsibility.
No, I agree with it. It's our responsibility, and I think we need to have the guidance in order to make that judgment call. I don't feel qualified.
It's our responsibility once we feel like we've had the proper analysis data, and I think that maybe that's the piece we're missing, if I'm hearing what you're saying, David. Yeah, so I think we're not there yet. So I'm kind of looking at what you were looking for here. I don't think we're ready to give anybody direction on drafting an ordinance. And so, I don't know, number 2, do you want direction on number 2?
To be honest with you, I don't know why the staff report, the ad hoc doesn't need the council's agreement to engage the public. I'm not sure why that, in fact, I'm not sure why that would be a required action here. But I'll ask you this. Do you think, is it worth pursuing? Do the 3 of you think that this is just unworkable in its current form? Or do you think...
What do you think? The correct answers didn't pop out, that's for sure. So that's, so it's difficult. I don't know. What do you think?
Deciding whether or not I want to say this.
Think hard.
We're not looking to outsource our jobs. We're looking to limit litigation exposure and risk, and specifically the house on Paseo Del Mar was mentioned, and specifically both sides are making moves to defend and aggressively pursue their actions. So the best thing we can do as a disinterested, uninterested party that has absolutely no revenue from this effort and is spending a lot of time investing in it, is to do everything we can to bring these parties together, get an independent sound engineer, get them to agree on the numbers, and ideally have formal signed releases at the end of that effort. I realize they may not want to do that, but log jamming this together just because it's our job and we're going to set policy and that's how it's going to be is going to land us in court.
Okay.
There's what I didn't want to say out loud.
That's a fair point.
And I kind of agree. Actually, back to Don's point. Don made an interesting point about the yet third sound engineer, whatever. Like, so I think we need to define what really it is we're after here. Not just somebody saying, "Oh, okay, I measured the sound here. Here's what it," right? I mean, I think we have two sets of that. So what's going to be different about the third set? And really, what are we after here? Because I do think at the end of the day, you have to take that data and figure out how to put parameters around the head count.
I think the
And the
answer to
number
that
of
question
cars.
is that we've got to search for a sound engineer that's got experience in working with similar kinds of venues throughout Southern California. And hopefully we can find one or
Such a
two.
thing? Yeah.
Pardon?
I say, is there such a thing? Hopefully, yeah.
Well, I believe there must be, because there are enough venues that are in residential areas and parks, and Greek Theater is only one example, but I don't have an answer for that, but I think we can work with staff and have them do some research.
Well, I wouldn't mind asking the city manager maybe to give the RPV a call, because you've mentioned that you feel like Catalina View Garden is kind of a comp.
Well, we definitely looked through their stuff and
You
took
seem to like
some
it.
examples from.
Yeah, you seem to think it was. You've mentioned it again.
They were one of the
One that you looked at.
sources.
So, I mean, they are a neighbor, and so maybe the city manager could reach out to the city manager and RPV just to start there.
I'm willing to reach out to the Greek Theater and the Los Angeles parks.
But I
think that's a different animal.
This comes back.
I think it's very similar.
I think, though, this comes back to Jim's question. Are you, what?
Well, I mean,
Some of these elements are workable for sure. Is that the question?
Well, I guess his question, okay, so his question was, is there enough here that's workable to move forward? And I don't know that I've heard an answer unless I was
Move
paying attention.
forward in what way?
for us the ad hoc to continue the work that we had planned.
So another public outreach, and then, and do we really want to kick the parking issue to the traffic
Well, we
committee,
have,
safety
the
committee?
reason we did that was
Oh, yeah, say
because,
more about that, thanks.
is because it's not part of the ZTA. I mean, if you're gonna, we're not gonna paint a curb red as part of ZTA. It has to go through a different process.
We just felt that was part of the Traffic Safety Committee's purview.
That was the proper process?
Yeah.
Maybe the best thing for us to do is to support your work, support your engagement, and then on a parallel track, pursue this sound issue.
And we
I
can't
concur
take-
with that.
We need to agendize that, I assume.
No, I think what we have here is brought up to at least direct the city manager to research these options and bring something back to the council. You're putting something on a future agenda,
Yes.
and you're not actually retaining someone tonight.
Okay, great. So we'll give that direction to Mark. You got that? The direction is to, I guess it's to identify a sound engineer to potentially assist us with
If you,
further analysis.
one or
here.
two if you can.
And it would be helpful to work with the ad hoc members
Yep, sounds
to
good.
review options and then bring something back later.
And then in terms of our public outreach,
I'm indifferent on that. Public outreach.
Sorry, Ms.
The.
I would do it.
You would do it?
Yep.
yeah,
Fine, I'm good with that.
do we need a motion on that? You want us to proceed with that?
Yeah, I'll go with the motion.
Yeah. Michael, you want to make a motion?
Do I get to just say so moved?
Sure.
Sure. Is it it's the second recommendation, right?
Oh, well, yeah, so I would move that we set in motion the 4-week public comment period and engagement process to receive feedback on draft items, including referral of recommendations on parking, red curb, and signage changes to Traffic Safety Committee.
Friendly amendment with the addition of the request to the city manager relative to the sound engineer.
It's your motion, not hers, right?
She just
It was a
read
friendly amendment, yeah. I don't know if that's a motion, that was direction, I think. Does that need to be a motion, or
I
is
don't
that
think
best?
you need that in the motion. You're
Because I
welcome
think it's
to add it if
direction,
you
right?
want, but yeah.
Okay, you read it eloquently. Your motion, I'll second it. There you go.
Okay.
That's your motion, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Nay, okay.
Thank you, guys.
Do we need a motion for to have him, okay.
The sound, no, that's
the
direction.
direction was
We gave
provided.
direction,
He's gonna
that's what Michael was
research,
just saying.
Work with that
Yeah,
ad hoc and bring something back.
yeah. Thank you, you guys.
Yeah.
I know it's hard.
All right, next up we have item number 9, Quarter 2 update on progress of fiscal year 2022-23 City Council work plan tasks.
Thank you, Mayor. This is our second opportunity to bring this forward to you. We last were here to talk about items on the work plan on October 11th. And what we found helpful then was to walk through each theme. So we have the work plan organized into different sections, including financial management, capital improvement, et cetera. So taking a look at the first page, when something is absolutely complete, we'll put an X in the box. But in cases where there's still work in progress, I don't want to document that until every last piece is done. In terms of item number 1 here, and of course the quarter column is really intended to serve as a goal and a milestone tracker for us to attempt to hit the targets on the milestones. And I want to comment a little bit on number 1 because there's a lot of pieces to this, and we have essentially some setting the table efforts underway now, particularly with respect to understanding and developing higher quality cost estimates for our capital improvement projects. And over the course of transitioning in our city engineer, our city engineer, and working to understand our storm drain system in particular and our sewers, there are some condition precedents that are necessary for us to advance first, which is to understand, particularly on the storm drain front, what that system looks like. And we've learned that we don't have quality data on that front. So some of the work that will go into developing a higher quality understanding of our capital needs is going to take time and not likely to be something that we can give a high quality estimate for at this point, even within this fiscal year, because it involves understanding where these pipes are and understanding the condition of these pipes, which requires television survey. There's a lot of work that can be done on understanding the operational costs moving forward and making higher quality estimates on that. But I wanted to bring to your attention some challenges on the CIP front. And so that's a bit of comment on this. I'm happy to answer some questions later on that.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do you have enough authority to get the work done to answer these questions? In other words, are there things that you've learned or your team has learned that need additional consideration?
This is really not that hard of an exercise, developing estimates for a long-range financial plan and establishing quality inputs.
But you mentioned locating where the pipes are or the sewers are, and that's what I'm really focused on.
So the new Public Works Director, newer, and the newer city manager have come to realize that, particularly on the storm drain front, we do not have quality information.
Those CDs and the stuff that you found downstairs in the storage area didn't pan out?
The good news is we have video, older video of our sewer system, right? But not video of our storm drains that we've found to date. In fact, on the storm drains, we recently did a Blue Jean Wednesday a couple weeks ago, and looked at some of the city's old files, which are unorganized and in a poor state in the parking garage underneath the building, and to understand what some of that history is there. And we can't tell you exactly what the system looks like for the storm drain right now. We have a lot of different files that would need to be sorted through, paper files, and we should television survey. We should first understand where exactly all of those pipes are. There are pipes, and these projects took place over a couple of decades, but they're old now. It's, these date back at least to the early 90s, I think, and earlier. And so what cities will typically do to understand their storm drains is television survey their pipes. Our challenge is we don't know where our pipes are and the diameter of our pipes.
Don't we pay McGowan Consulting, no relation, a lot of money to tell us the condition of our storm drains?
They can't tell us the condition of our storm drain until we put a camera down each of those. So we can network all of the pieces together, and that's a big exercise. What I should clarify on this, on all the inputs to the financial plan and the modeling, it's just important for us to know that on the capital front, the storm drain numbers are going to have to be an estimate with an asterisk. And the first step on this is going to involve understanding which pipes to survey and spending money on camera survey work. And then what happens is an engineer reviews the camera work and will essentially grade it as green, yellow, red. Red means these are in imminent need of replacement. The others can probably wait, but we need to monitor. So there is a lot of work to do, and there will have to be an assumption made on storm drains. Sewers, better data for sewers. We have older camera video. We know that there are GIS layers that the sanitation districts in the county have, where there is some work to do on this front related to understanding exactly who is actively monitoring the various pieces of infrastructure in the city. So we've come across situations where we believe that there is not active management of the pipes or maintenance of these pipes. And there's probably some ambiguity. We think there's ambiguity that can be resolved with better mapping in terms of who's actively maintaining, who owns certain pieces of infrastructure. And we have some access issues on both, primarily the sewer, I think, more than the storm drain. There is an enormous amount of work that needs to take place on both the sewer and the storm drain. Sewer's in better shape than storm drain in terms of where we are understanding our system.
Can I interject? Talk about streets.
Yeah.
Streets, we are weeks away from maybe a couple weeks. I'll hope it's a couple. We should have information very soon from a more sophisticated survey of our streets that was performed earlier this year, and we're awaiting the data. What that's going to do is take what we would see with our eyes, and it's going to be a technological analysis of our street conditions, and we'll have answers on whether we're meeting that 70 PCI number that we target. So we will know soon what that number is, and we're hopeful that it's close to 70 or above 70, and it will reveal whether we're a little behind on our investment and whether we need to accelerate our investment. So the good news is that HR Green has worked on that. We'll have data soon. We haven't received it yet, and then we'll share it when we have it. That's an input to this. So it's a little early for us to put all the pieces together on the long-range financial forecast, and we did do some modeling last year during the budget process with some larger assumptions. But there are inputs that we're still tracking down, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on the storm drain front, that in particular is going to have to be a cost estimate. Pension costs, we have some nice modeling tools, understanding our operational needs. I think the organization has a pretty good feel for what we need. We don't really need to grow the staff. There may be some, adjustments here and there, but it won't be a material impact on the forecasting. And then, and we know what happens if Measure E expires and what the cost of that is and the value. So I think we'll have, probably everything but the storm drain numbers here, which is an important, input, that those, at some point, we're probably, a decade or two away from having to make some sizable investments in replacing storm drains, but we're going to need, any city that doesn't plan ahead on that front is going to get caught, and they'll be confronting a large general obligation bond at some point if they're not investing periodically and trying to stay ahead of that. It's similar to streets. You want to spend the lighter money on maintenance rather than replacing the infrastructure. So I wanted to take a little bit more time on that one because I know it's such an important task of ours, but to share with you and the community that there are some pieces to this that are still under analysis.
So just not to belabor the point, but just to wrap it up, then for storms and sewers, are you identifying what the missing pieces are and the steps that are going to be required to secure those pieces in a timeline, and you'll report that back to us to update our understanding?
Right. I think we're probably about just the same, in terms of the sewers, we're probably weeks away from, I would say weeks-ish, for information from the county. And so once we receive that, then we really need to get to putting an updated map together using probably some HR Green staff to help us with that mapping. And that will clarify, it will lead to discussions with the county and the sanitation districts to understand if there's any ambiguity in terms of who's maintaining certain areas and who's owning certain pieces of that infrastructure. Because I think some of the recent sewer challenges have revealed that we have some ambiguity related to pieces of our infrastructure. And there's going to be a point where we also share with you some other infrastructure. Our access to some of these facilities and infrastructure is
falling apart.
is starting to deteriorate, and so we're going to need to talk about access to some of the assets as well. Any other questions on number one?
No, I just would like to applaud all the work that Honest to Sea has been doing and digging out from underneath this morass of information, and it's not done yet.
One quick, maybe question and or comment. The other morning, the two of us went on a little adventure and checked out the Lenata Bay Plaza parking lot that has potholes all over the place next to the sidewalk. And we both aren't or weren't sure, at least I'm still unsure, whether we missed that in pavement management or what happened. And so I wonder, in considering the rest of CIP, if I just happened to stumble upon the one place in the entire city that might have been missed, or if there's more.
I'm aware of your recent field trip to the plaza, and I think
I did not bring a peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
And I think our assessment, we spent a little time today talking about this, and I think we believe that it was missed when there was a transition of staffing, and it was likely that something was spotted, and because of active construction at a nearby business, there was a decision potentially made to postpone that particular piece for a year, and then a transition and a loss of awareness of what that agreement was potentially happened, and then we find ourselves having a few years down the road without having done the project. So clearly we need to reprioritize that piece and move it back into the queue for a more near-term investment on an overlay, or in this case, maybe some fixes to the parking lot. In terms of, let me move through to a couple of others here. And I want to also just comment and make an observation that a number of these pieces are intertwined, right? So ERP, for example, is tied to staffing and having the capacity to move some of this forward. And I was taking some notes on accomplishments for 2022 and also challenges and issues. And we did well filling some important roles within the organization, and we've had challenges filling, for example, the second planner position and particularly the senior accountant type position. And we've done some research. The market is very tough right now, and I think it presents a challenge because it's a barrier to completing some of our tasks. We were a little farther behind. I was noting that our audit committee meeting last year was in August. It was August 2nd. And between August 2nd and today, we're going to provide you an update. We've received a draft. We've received the ACFR for 2022 before the end of the year, and we are, I think, probably 2 weeks out. We're going to send comments back next Monday, and then we expect the final audit findings and comments about a week later. But we did some catch up on that front. But a lot of this is linked, and we do have an effort underway now to, while we will redo the recruitment for the senior accountant position, because we had a candidate that the week before they were to start told us they were moving. It's linked to the accomplishment of some of these tasks, so we're going to augment our staff by filling that with a temporary position soon. So that is something that is important to a number of the efforts, whether it's the ERP, whether it's the next item here, number 4, the review of internal financial controls. Part of the challenge is making sure we have the right amount of people to separate the controls. And there's a nice linkage here also between the audit findings from last year and some of the developments on the IT front that are actively underway, which is great news because we're going to bring you back, I believe it's February 28th, an IT roadmap that you requested, which will sync the progress on the IT front with some of the internal control improvements that will be yielded from changes with the IT front, as well as following through on some of the audit recommendations. So a number of these are linked, and I think we're going to see some progress here soon on with that February 28th report on the IT front.
Mark, you say that the RFP for the ERPs to follow the completion of the audit. So do you guys have a timeline for when you think that RFP for the ERP will be issued? Are we talking about March, August?
So we haven't had a conversation in the last 2 weeks, but we're at a point now where the audit is essentially wrapping up, and we have the opportunity to begin the transition to moving to the ERP next steps. So I think we talked about being able to move forward with bringing in a consultant to help us first, and then working with that consultant to develop the RFP that would go out on the market. So step 1 is bringing the consultant in.
But I can't remember, was the consultant RFP already drafted, or was it just conceptual that was shared with us?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I can't hear you.
It's not drafted, it's just
Yeah,
conceptual.
right. And frankly, we prioritized the audit so we could catch up this year with the 3 of the 4 staff members in the department. In terms of, let's see, we do have a meeting this week on item number 5, and appreciate the leadership of the ad hoc members in helping us put that back on track. Item number 6 is going to be, we're going to touch on that at our next IPAC meeting on January 17th. And I'm sorry, I think I conflated number 5 with number 7 a little bit there, but and then why don't I pause and ask if you have any questions on the remaining areas in the financial management section.
Well, how is number 5 going? If we were referring to number 7, what's
Yeah,
what's
no,
up
it
with
was number 5.
Oh, okay.
It was number 5.
What's left to be done on the internal financial controls procedures and prioritize if we've already approved something? What still needs to happen?
So I think there are two pieces to this. The banking is one of them, and of course we did recently have some meetings on this, and there's active conversations with the bank right now, with the treasurer and staff.
Is this the signature card kind of stuff, the email that you sent out? Okay.
And that's the work that we recently have essentially completed, and now it's a matter of moving into the banks and updating that. In terms of financial controls, there were some recommendations in last year's audit, and what I think there's an integration here with the updates associated with the IT investments that we're making, and there's parallels between some of the audit recommendations are financial control related, and so they're audit related, and they're also aligned with the review of financial controls and procedures. It's more than just the banking. It's how do we, it's staffing, but it's separation of duties at the staff level. So right now with 3 people, it's not as optimal as we would have with 4 people, and that impacts the financial controls. So I think there's, what I've envisioned is once we...
Bless you.
There's an alignment here with the IT roadmap, which I think we'll be able to comment on some of the impacts on the financial controls at the same time on February 28th. But I've always envisioned an engagement with the FAC at a subsequent point in time to receive their feedback, review our processes, and receive some feedback from them as well before we really would ever be ready to put an X in the box. So I think this is one that clearly, if we're anticipating that second half of this, I would rather continue the anticipated engagement in February and subsequent engagement with the FAC on number 4. Any other questions on financial management? Okay. I'll move into capital and operational. I've already made some comments on the CIP front that relate to row 10, and we talked earlier tonight about dropping the second phrase on number 11 here, the reference to incorporation into the long-range financial plan. And then on number 12, a lot of time was spent last year. I want to thank Councilmember Lozey, former Mayor Lozey, and former Mayor Pro Tem, and now Mayor Roos, for all their work on working with Athens to get that finished. And we know that we're bringing back a report, and I don't have the what's the date we scheduled for the review? Which one? Okay, February 14th for bringing back the Palos Verdes Drive West follow-up discussion on February 14th. We have completed on number 14. This is still something that's only extended the agreement by 1 year, so I think there's still, it's clear that at some point later in the calendar year, we need to make a decision on whether we're feeling comfortable with the progress on the landscaping contract, or whether it's time to, consider some form of an RFP there. And then at the last check-in, I indicated that on item number 15, I wanted an opportunity to look at how our staffing, once we had full staffing, whether it felt like we were able to support the initiatives. I think the challenge is more on the finance front right now than the planning front. So the challenge is how do we make sure that we're able to support replace the vacant position and get it filled. And right now the interim solution is going to be a temp. which is not a great long-term solution, but that's an Achilles heel to some of the work we're trying to do, and it will help for a separation of duties, from a separation of duties perspective as well. On the police communications infrastructure project, the date is actually January 24th. It's our next meeting, not the 28th. I was conflating that with February. So we're bringing you that report at our next meeting. And when we have a better update for CIP, we'll bring you information on number 17. Let me pause there. That's the end of that section.
Well, didn't we already approve the CIP budget for this year? So this should really be about that rather than these future things. So it's probably like slurry seal and street fixes.
It is. There was a reference to also some capital planning. I'm really looking at years 1 and 2, but this is, the linkage here is tying the work that's happening with capital to the work plan, which I like, so that we're not overlooking the fact that there's work happening in the field. So yes, we've completed the slurry seal, and we're getting close to another slurry seal and resurfacing. That's Paseo Del Mar, and that's going to be an RFP that goes out to bid about a couple months out, 2 months, maybe 2 months out. And so it's a little early to check the box on the completion of the CIP projects. With respect to communications and customer service, we're going to talk about number 18 a little bit later on the next agenda item, so we'll come back to that. We're making progress with improving the connectivity with residents. There's still work to be done on this. Our numbers are up 25% on the email listserv, which was the focus of this one, but we're trying to track other social media platforms as well. And of course, in number 20 and 21, this is an ongoing task, and we're on track with publishing quarterly newsletters and biweekly updates. We've actually completed 12 biweekly updates now, and we've started on a budget and brief that's under final review that relates to the June 30th, 2022 year end. Any questions on the communications tasks? And Kia's been a real help with advancing that.
On number 19, around trying to maximize the number of people who have signed up, have you reached out to like Lanada Bay Homeowners Association in Malaga Cove to ask them if they would do an email, that has our link, and just kind of do a special email on that?
Right. We haven't had a meeting yet, but there's a plan to have a meeting with representatives of the two homeowners associations and other communication representatives of community groups to talk about those opportunities for collaboration. We haven't deployed the gimmicks yet, but I will. I know that we have at least one council member that's shared the opportunities for the listserv link and how to get connected. And so we want to just engage as many people with databases of emails as possible to share how people can get more connected. We've made some, the staff report on the next item talks about some of the nuances that the adjustments that we've made just in the city update to try to encourage more sharing of the city updates. So at the very top of the updates now, the first link you see is how to connect and receive it. And at the end of the update, we now have sharing opportunities on social media. So once you read it, you can share it with others, and we'll grow followers that way, and we are.
And then my other question is there any way to tell if the listserv and the Instagram and the Facebook are all the same people? Or are we tapping into different groups that way?
There are metrics on Facebook and Instagram that show you where your followers are coming from, and I don't think those platforms give you their email addresses, so there would be no way to verify that. But a majority of our followers on social media are based in the city. There are some from other cities in the South Bay or even states, but most of them are residents, local residents. And I don't have the numbers for the police department, but I know they have a lot more engagement than the city itself.
And
you would you would be amazed. Just quick on this experience. I'm in a meeting at the golf club, and we're talking about this subject of communication, and come to find mentioning what was in a newsletter, and the current board president and past board president of the golf club both look up and say, "We're not getting those." They're getting them now.
We need to write that into their concession agreement, right?
Right? I mean, it's amazing that people that are so closely associated with the city look up and say to me, "I'm not seeing the city newsletters."
Actually, that's another, when you talk about reaching out to Lenata Bay homeowners and Malaga Cove homeowners, reach out to each of the concessions and have them also do an email blast that says, hey, you know, and they can, you know, not every member of the golf club, for example, is a resident, but they can certainly sort the list by residents and then have them push a message out and say, hey, you know, sign up, all those things you said to share and follow and all that stuff.
Right. And I want to control rumors. There's no truth to the rumor that the rainbow photograph that we recently put up on Instagram accounts for entirely the growth of followers in Instagram in October, since October. So that's, you know, that's just
I don't believe it.
Okay, so parklands, 23 and 24 are linked, and there's an active there have been active conversations for a couple months now with the ad hocs, the council ad hocs and the park ad hoc and the parklands ad hoc. There's a grant opportunity near term, and we're going to be bringing you a grant resolution I think on the meeting of February 28th. The grant is due on the 3rd of March. So we're going to seek some funding to help fund the tree inventory, and that we've made some good progress on there, and I think our focus is going to be on the street trees more than anything in the parklands. So that is something you'll be hearing about in about a month. And then on the tree management policy, we've just recently transitioned to discussions related to the tree management policy, and we're in a process of receiving feedback on ideas, and so that work is underway now, and it's probably fair to say we still have a decent amount of work to do on the policy before it moves to the Parklands Committee for review and then to the council.
One question on the parklands, Mark, it's not one of the objectives, but if I remember correctly, about a year ago, we received a grant for the park next to the library, and it had a 2-year window on it, and I just don't want to see us ignore that so that we lose that opportunity.
Right. Do you want to comment briefly on that?
Yeah, that project is part of the CIP, and it is a 2-year window. We have another 1.5 years left on it. So right now is getting HR Green going on starting with the concept and the design, and then it would be construction next fiscal year.
So there will be an RFP on that going out for design? Or-
No, HR Green is doing it.
Are we seeking input from anybody, or are we just designing?
Well, right now they're looking through the grant application and contract to figure out what we can actually do with the funds in order to meet the requirements of what we agreed to. We would bring the design here.
I would like to make sure that there's some communication with HR Green and some of the council members as to what's included or not included in that design.
So I'm making a note, that's Farnham Martin Park, right? So, and I think a lot of the focus is pathway for that grant, so.
It's accessibility.
Accessibility, ADA.
but I think it has some flexibility for items to prevent one of our council members from going down and watering flowers on a weekly or daily basis.
Was that specifically mentioned by the state? Separate, maybe productive question. On the tree side, I realize this is random, but it's here. Residents have brought up, and I've noticed on occasion, that when trees are cut, the remains of the tree are left behind. Is that being addressed in any of our parklands efforts?
I know of recently that there's been parts of trees left when they were private trees, and we removed the trees from the roadway so that they weren't a blockage anymore. For ones that are in parklands, if it's a tree that's being removed by the city's contractor, they are being directed to remove the whole thing. We've had a lot lately with everything where it's kind of a game of catch-up at this point. So there are some that haven't been picked up that are in areas that were partially trimmed, and we'll be going back to get those. If there's
Okay,
specific locations, we
just for future mention, so you have it. Palos Verdes Boulevard, coming into the city on the right-hand side towards the triangle, large eucalyptus tree trunks left over and sitting in the parklands and have been there for a long time. There's others on a couple of trails I'm familiar with. We don't need to get to this level of detail here, but I'm asked, it's interesting, I'm asked semi-frequently by people in different parts of the city, why does the city leave trunks behind when they remove trees?
You're talking about trunks in the ground or just like logs on
Logs.
the ground?
Logs. They tip a tree and leave the remains.
My understanding is that that's not our practice. It may have been previously, but currently, we're not.
I think some of that wasn't removed during fire abatement because the fire department said if it was flush with the ground, it wasn't a fire hazard.
And I know in fire abatement, there were also areas where instead of removing an entire tree or bush and different things, they was left as stumps in order to, I guess, help with erosion.
Maybe we could do a cursory review in particular of
Yeah,
our
we should.
materials.
We can chat.
PB Drive, fill in the blank. It's, people drive around and they ask, questions about those arterials, about why those exist. That's
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
In terms of Road 25, the improving parklands encroachment enforcement, we've had other priorities to work on first before we've tried to tackle this one. We've kind of approached this from an incremental perspective. So we've had one success. We have 2 community summits, resident summits in a couple of neighborhoods that haven't moved forward yet, that are good starting efforts for a subsequent engagement, but we're going to need to bring you sort of a framework at some point that you react to, and we talk about your willingness, your expectations regarding what we've identified as challenges for enforcement. So in some cases, it's the corridor's overgrown, there are either resident planted trees and bushes in the middle that we should remove, or there are improvements like a wall or a fence or some other improvement, that a patio that's been added to a right-of-way that we really should remove. And so that's a really complex challenge. If there's an item of the 3 of these that will slip a little this year, this is a Q4 item, but there's a lot of work on this front, and knowing that we have a need to bring you the updated RFP and we're planning to bring you an updated RFP and a communication strategy for the fuel mitigation project. We want that vendor to be under contract and working about early June, which coincides with when things dry out and when the grasses have stopped growing. So we're going to be bringing you a draft RFP soon for that, and a communication strategy that helps explain why. But we're treating those as higher priorities than the surgical approach we're using right now on encroachments and enforcement related to it.
So The Parklands ad hoc for Parkland encroachments just recently sent an email out to the city council ad hoc members about setting up a meeting for Tuesday, and I just noticed that staff's not on it. So who from staff would be the right person, and should we be having that meeting or postponing it based off of your comment?
It would be the Public Works Director, and I think we can, it might be good to have a meeting and talk a little bit about the challenges and bring the two council members to that same meeting. So
Carl and I
maybe-
have met with them as well, separately.
maybe we can work together on scheduling a time for everyone to be together in the same room or on the same Zoom. Okay. Information technology. So we've set in motion a number of efforts at moving the servers off-site, and doing some additional scanning activities and testing. There's still work to be done on that front from an implementation standpoint. And when that implementation is finished, it opens the door to other opportunities along with improvements that will be yielded from the eventual transition to the new ERP. But the plan is to bring you an IT roadmap on February 28th to give you a status report on the various initiatives. So when we look at what this will also include is a summary of all of the audit recommendations that we've received. And I think in most cases, we're going to find that the investments that we've made with the IT solutions address the comments. There's going to be at least one where it won't be addressed until after the ERP system's implemented. But the roadmap should clear that up, and I think that will provide some additional clarity. Row 27, we've had active conversations. In fact, there was testing today on some of this. We've learned that we have some computers that are Office 365 type computers and others that are pre-Office 365. And the pre-computers can soon have the multi-factor authentication. And we've invested in some email security enhancements at a recent meeting. But there are other software products and opportunities for multi-factor authentication, and that would follow the work associated with transitioning servers to the cloud and some of the other improvements that we've just set in motion. So that's also, these are areas that can be covered in the IT roadmap.
One suggestion. In the responsible party being FIT, that you add the security vendor alongside them.
Good idea. And the yellow really is a nod to, this is something that we think is better defined as a Q3 item now, just because of timing. And our hope is that the discussion on the 28th really identifies what the remaining items are for these particular 26, 27, and 28. And then 29 is something that we haven't invested a lot of time on, other than it presents a continuing challenge. I'm seeing a nod there. We've invested time, but we're not prepared to go to RFP at this point in time. Any questions on IT?
Does the use of technology in the council chambers fit into your IT section, or is that addressed in communication?
I have been thinking about that as a budget opportunity in the next budget cycle that we talk about during the budget process, because I think we believe that there are some opportunities to modernize this room and replace the screen, for example, with televisions, and improve some camera work in here so the community can see the speakers, and we can zoom a little bit in on staff and council that are speaking. So I think there's room for a conversation, but maybe better to integrate the, into the budget process for work post July 1.
Thanks.
Okay, and then on the planning front, at the next meeting, we have an amendment to the CSG agreement that is coming to you on January 24th. And the safety element, we have, I think, an early draft now, and that has a little bit more work to do. I think we talked today about April-ish, May-ish to the Planning Commission. Okay, I'm seeing nods. So that's essentially where we're at with the safety element. I did have a meeting with the Community Development Director and the Public Works Director to walk through some of the comments that were received at the joint meeting and verify that those are going to be integrated into that, so feeling good about that. And then the online permit we've treated that as a lower level priority so that we haven't focused on item number 32.
Can I raise one other question? What happened to zoning?
The zoning map, right, updating the zoning map is something that we haven't advanced yet, but it's something that we are aware should occur. There's going to need to be engagement with the city attorney's office on that one. The cost of this update is going to be more in terms of time and the attorney's work. The technology improvements, just the mapping itself, is going to be very low cost because we have a map today. It's just a matter of updating the map.
I just don't think we want to lose focus on that.
I have a question regarding the online permitting. I realize it's lower priority, but I thought I saw in the warrants or in one of the documents today that we had received, maybe it was in your October financial report, Stephen, there was mention made of SB2 money, and I thought that was money that had funds that had expired a long time ago that the previous community development director had applied for. So my question is, are those funds still available to cover online permitting?
Your acting community development director worked very hard to get a last-minute reimbursement request in and a request to extend those funds. That reimbursement was a result of that work, and I believe we also got access to additional funding. Is that correct?
Yeah, we should be getting some contracts to extend it. So then hopefully with the
High five.
what was approved, that it would go, because I think it was for ADUs, for online permitting, I think were what the contract was for.
Yeah,
The grant was for.
And it was that year's housing element also, or housing element work with the first consultant, I think, was part of it.
Yes, we got all the funds for that.
So you expect that we might actually have funds now to cover online permitting? We just need to find bandwidth?
Wait for the contract.
Okay, great, thank you, great work.
Okay.
Does that conclude?
That concludes all of these. Unless you have additional questions, and it would be appropriate to receive any public comment.
Yep. Any public comment on this item? Seeing none, any other conversation on it? Yep. We're ready to move on then? Okay, moving on to new business, item 10, review a draft citywide communication strategy.
So that's going to be me. So the city's work plan includes a task to develop and implement a cost-effective, inclusive, and modern citywide communication strategy as a key deliverable. And one of the condition precedents for us to really deploy effort on this front was to hire a management analyst and Kia has a very strong background in communications. And so today we wanted to take an opportunity to just introduce you to some work that's developing behind the scenes on communications. So you know that we've restarted the quarterly newsletter, adjusted it a little bit over time through a couple of these iterations. And on the city update, we've developed a bit of a pace to those now, and I think you can see in the staff report that we've calibrated those and continue to calibrate elements of the city update. So while those are examples of a modern, cost-effective communications strategy, a piece of the strategy, we want you to know that there are opportunities like that. We've decided, we're not waiting to deploy those. Those are moving forward now. But developing a citywide communication strategy is something that we're trying to think of in terms of phases. And so if you look at the discussion section in the staff report, we're introducing to you today an outline of some proposed deliverables and activities, but the strategy is going to include goals, measurable objectives, strategic initiatives that align with the work plan, and we're anticipating developing that and deploying that in 3 phases. So we're really in the phase 1 right now, which is the research and analysis phase. We'll move to recommending and reviewing, and refining and implementing. So a good example of that is one of the attachments to the staff report. This is a communications assets inventory. This builds upon some prior work that Kylan and I did to identify various ways that the city's communicating. And from that, we're beginning to develop some concepts for external, internal communications, as well as some tools. So we've put together some example deliverables and activities. I do want to touch on a couple of these tonight, and I did do a trial run with the mayor and the mayor pro tem just to see if they had any fatal flaws to some of the ideas. But under the deliverables, external, public facing, on this chart here, ideas include developing department information one-pagers. So this is in the concept phase right now. These can be made available to our staff when there's a question about what certain departments do. We can place that on the website. We can make it available to the front counter for customers, et cetera. It can include information on KPIs and deliverables and work over the prior year. Did you know one-pagers? So these are concepts where it's a frequently asked question. You're going to see it show up in city updates and quarterly newsletters. We're anticipating maybe carving out a piece of the updates for did you know type questions. So while this, we call it a pager, it's really paper or digital. And I think you'll see it deployed in lots of different communication strategies. We do think that the website needs a redesign, and it's expensive right now, and we think there are more cost-effective solutions that we could deploy relatively quickly that will provide responsive design for people accessing us via their phone or their tablet in addition to their computer. And the transition is to the phone and these other devices, not the desktop computer. In terms of external activities, it's my opinion that the Citizens Academy that the city previously had was a good idea, and that there's value in restarting that. It's a way for our community to get to know the city and for us to engage. And the time commitment is probably, there's a bit of a kickoff. I think we're internally anticipating something that could begin in July. With a small cohort for the 23-24 fiscal year, where it would include a tour of city assets as a kickoff, and then touch points with our various departments through the year, and a bit of a celebration at the end. So we have the template from the work that was done in the past year, and we have templates from other cities as well, and the idea is to meld the best of both and put together an academy that could launch as early as July. In terms of the community partner network, that's really a reference to working with our partners like the homeowners associations, the school district, others, at sharing communications. And tonight you suggested the concessions as well. That's a good idea. City manager community 1-hour Zoom chats. I think some of the initial feedback is 1 hour is a long time, and 10 to 20 minutes might be a lot better. So this is good. This is good feedback. This is just a concept, but we've all become used to using Zoom, and it's an easy opportunity to enhance the way we communicate to the community at no cost. So we could have a monthly series where we might interview the mayor. We might talk about the city's budget. We might talk about what's happening with our planning commission and profile staff or topics, our long-range financial forecast. And it's also nimble enough where if a topic comes up that's time-sensitive or a new issue like a landslide, we could convene a special meeting on Zoom, invite the community through all of our social media platforms and talk about it. The intent will be to record these as well, and then in our other communication platforms, refer people so we can go on to Nextdoor and let people know we're about to have our monthly chat, and we're going to be live at this time, but you can also visit our YouTube channel and watch it after the fact and let us know if you have any questions. Same idea with the police department and the weekly crime reports. So right now, we communicate only via paper and email, right? But the idea is to turn this into a 1 to 5 minute update that would be presented by one of our sergeants, for example, to make those charts on Zoom. So this is one-way communication primarily, but we would present the charts on a brief video. Again, put them on our website or link them to our website via a YouTube channel. And the sergeant can embellish on some of the graphs that people see and share in a different way. And so we're hopeful that that would be received well. With both of these last two items, these are ideas that will be calibrated over time and refined. So that's the concept here, is we'll learn from our own experience. We'll talk to our customer. And we do have we'll get to that under tools, but plan to engage with the customer. On the internal side, we would like to update our style guide, which carries over to other things like staff reports, our policy frame, the way we share our policies, just a consistent look and theme to the city. Best practices guides for all of our platforms and emergency communications policies. On tools, I mentioned the survey instrument, so our thinking is we'd like to develop a community survey on how, asking our customers, how do you expect us to communicate with you? What can we do better? What are your ideas? Here's how are you engaged on all of these various platforms? So survey work down the road, a communications calendar, communications roadmap, similar to the IT roadmap we talked about. Online engagement report would just be keeping track of our statistics and what's happening with, that one of the interesting things we've done with looking at the Facebook and the Instagram, you can look at the data in lots of different ways. You can look beyond just the number of followers and see your reach. How many people what's your opening rate for our emails? And we happen to have a very high open rate on our emails. It's extraordinarily high. I think it's north of 60%. So north of 60% of our the people on our email list are today opening every city update. That's great. We just need more subscribers. But the online engagement report would share with you trends and data in different ways. KPIs and success factors are just things that we will be able to communicate. And then internally also work with our employees and survey our own employees to help refine work that we're doing. We also think there's value in finding some focus groups. This would be done through a random sample to get some independent feedback. So we wouldn't be looking for volunteers. We would probably end up contacting people that won the lottery and invite them to sit down and talk to us, and probably run not just one, but several of these to receive some feedback on the developing plan. So this is tonight just a sketch of what's underway, and we've been at it for about 2 months. and happy to answer any questions you have or receive any feedback on any comments I've made.
Questions for staff?
No questions. Thrilled with the progress. Look forward to more.
I just have a little bit of feedback on your assets inventory. We talked about contacting the concessions. The concessions also have bulletin boards. I know we use them for the roundabout, but I think more people probably go to the concessions than check the City Hall bulletin board. So, and then the other one that's not here is actual hard copy mailings, because, sometimes we use those, and those are a tool that's available to us as well. And I don't know if you want to include the noticing that goes out for like Planning Commission and parklands and things like that, but those are all tools that we use. Because my guess is what you're doing is, as you identify a need or something that needs to be communicated, you're going to look at your inventory and say, what are the tools that we should be using in order to communicate to whomever we need to communicate.
Right, and we view this as a living document, so it's never complete, it's just always evolving.
Any other questions for staff?
Well, and just another comment, I don't know if this is what you were touching on, Don, but I do think we need to have a hard copy newsletter. I know that's probably very old-fashioned, but I think people like them.
I agree.
And that's what I forgot when I said I forgot something at home when I came to the meeting. I was going to try and run home and run back, but I was cleaning through some stuff, and I found what probably was the last newsletter that we did, so I wanted to bring an example, so I'll bring it next time. But I think people like getting it, and maybe, I would say quarterly. I think it's somewhere along the line, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I feel like we went from 4 times a year to 3 times a year. You could do 2 times a year, but then you're kind of missing a lot of good dates. I know it's probably feels like a step backwards. Probably to Kia, it probably feels like a huge step backwards, but I think that people get that in the mail and like, oh, hey, look, and flip through it. And it used to have, because I liked the example I had because it was kind of a big one, and it highlighted an employee, and it had, did you know Big Trash Pickup Day was blah? And it actually, I think it had a Measure E thing, or it might have even had Measure D, so maybe it was really old. But anyway, so I'd like to see you incorporate that back into the repertoire and into the proposed activities, because I do think we need it. I think residents like it.
Do you think it needs to be every quarter? Do you think it needs to be every other newsletter? Do you think?
Didn't
We used to do quarterly.
Didn't Gary with Athens offer to pay for it at one meeting? There was a meeting where we were going back and forth, and we were challenged with trying to find budget funding and being careful and whatever else. We stopped the newsletter, and he happened to be at the meeting, and he stood up at public comment and said, we'd be more than happy to help with that. There you go.
Well, yeah, Athens, HR Green, all of our vendor partners, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if it's a money issue. When it was pulled, it was a little bit of a money issue, but it was really a staffing bandwidth issue too, because somebody's got to write the
There was
thing.
more money at that time.
Originally, it was money, but then over the years, as we've said, well, why don't we bring that back? It's like, well, who's going to write that thing? And now we have a person. So anyway, sorry, that's my 2 cents. I think residents enjoy it, and I think it's a good way of communicating with every household.
Okay. I'm going to take a moment to ask for public comment on this. Okay. Any more discussion or questions you guys have?
Nope.
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that, Mr. City Manager. And we will move on to mayor and council member reports. Who would like to start?
Well, I can just start off by, there's been very few meetings during the holidays, but Don and I have a meeting scheduled tomorrow with the ad hoc on the long-range planning. Jim and I have got did we reschedule the meeting from tomorrow to Tuesday or Monday or sometime? Whatever date that works for me. That's on the centennial issues. We've had some outreach. The golf club would like to continue some discussions we had during the holidays. That's yet to be scheduled. Those are most of the activities that I've been dealing with.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Kemps?
We've had some collaborative work going on to keep the IT initiatives that are already approved moving. One in particular was we had a vendor that wanted to offer up some surprise costs, and fortunately, they did what they needed to do, and they are no longer surprise costs. So that got worked out. That there is some progress coming on. We keep talking about Mimecast for email security, so I assume that'll be in the update. But there's some progress coming there. What else? I think that's it.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Lozey?
Let's see, well, I have to admit, I enjoyed being dark the second half of December, so that was nice to kind of reset and break, and Happy New Year to everybody. So yeah, but getting back in it this month, feeling refreshed and jumping back in. So we've got PV Transit this month, South Bay COG. And do you want future agenda items, or are you going to go back around?
No, actually, I was meant to say that at the beginning. I do want to do
both
one pass.
One pass? Okay. Do you want to go back, or, okay. I think you might have hit some of these. So the audit, the grant for Farnham Martin Park. I did notice over the holidays, maybe a few more homeless people around the bluffs and parklands, and I know we are a small city and we have a handful, but you know, we do probably need to have our eye on that ball. I mean, obviously, thanks to Karen Bass, that is going to be the hot topic of the year. So, so let's make sure we're just looking at our own house on that. So I'd kind of like to know where we are. And we've had one particular homeless person near Monte Malaga School, and obviously that's a concern for those residents. So I want to make sure that we have an update on that, please.
Is that a request for?
A request for a future agenda item for an update on that, maybe?
And I think, has there been I'm looking at our captain, has there been a development on that particular, I know that there's work that the city attorney and we've talked conceptually about certain things related to this, but I think we've had some developments with certain locations in town. And I will share with you that there is a fairly significant state investment that is intended to address the most challenging of our, what will sometimes is referred to as unsheltered but homeless community, and that's a statewide initiative that will pilot this year in about 5 counties, maybe 6, and then the intent is all counties will implement in the following year. I don't think LA County is actually part of the first pilot. I think it happens in year 2. But any comments on the homeless front? Okay.
Well, I would just say maybe a little bit of a staff report on that at a future meeting, just because our residents need to hear. You know, when they raise a concern or make a complaint or you know, say, hey, I think we're seeing this, and we kind of say, oh, you know, what are we going to do? Well, that's not an answer. So yeah, that was it. Future item, an update on Black Knight. I'm sorry, I probably didn't have these in any particular order. We did talk about, and it wasn't in the work plan, but we did talk about we would do one department this year, zero-based budgeting. 2, thank you. So it's here. So I just want to make sure that doesn't fall off our radar. I think I saw on the list of future agenda items a review of citywide fees, but I had that on my list. Also don't want that to fall off our radar. And also and if I missed it, you know, and you guys got it, tell me, but did we as in Athens communicate to residents regarding the organic waste requirements? I will tell you, I should have brought this too, but my parents live in Torrance, and they got a beautiful glossy thing in the mail that said exactly what they had to do and what goes in which, you know, they separate. So I said, oh, I'll take that.
I did get one.
You did?
No, I have no standing to speak.
No. Oh, you did?
Member of the public.
Okay. Okay, well then maybe you went out.
They included this really word-dense Back
our bill?
Back of the page in the bill. Yeah, it wasn't what I was
They were supposed to
expecting.
mail something out to
I
every
know.
household, were they not?
In December.
Did we get that done?
They did communicate. They enjoyed the article that we had used and essentially replicated most of it in some communications. And then we used that, we developed an article to share the developments both in the city update and in the quarterly update.
I had occasion to call them on something else and asked about the container for the kitchen. And the person that was on the phone had no idea what I was asking for.
It's not due till July.
She'll find out in June.
Oh, okay. So that's my list, but I do want to say that my first meeting on January 12th, 2022 was 92 minutes. Just want to say.
Let's just go over those real quick. I think the citywide fees is an effort that's underway, right?
It's coming to your next meeting. We've
Yes.
noticed
Oh, okay.
it for the next meeting on January 24th.
The zero-based budget, I assume we don't need an agenda item. That's already a policy.
We're going to be using the last 12 months, and we're basically using December printing documents for the two departments, and we'll get started on that.
Okay. What specifically are you asking for in Black Knight?
Specifically, I am asking for, well, I guess where we are budget-wise, and then I know that we're doing kind of Friday and Saturday and not after-school traffic control, but the after-school hours are brutal going through, so I think just the police department to give kind of an overview of that service and the value that we're getting, and do we need to expand it, or what's
Okay.
happening with it?
Sounds good. So you've got both of those then marked, homeless and Black Knight, okay. All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't know, after tonight, yeah, I've got all these other ad hocs I'm working on.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That's all.
So just busy, busy, busy.
I will end just by sharing,
No, that's fine, that's fine.
David, did you not go? You did go.
No, I don't have anything to add that's not already been suggested, but we just we're probably going to need more work sessions, especially when we get into going through these ad hoc reports.
You are reading my mind, because that was the next words out of my mouth, was that
That's why I was going to yield to you.
the city manager has been talking to me and the Mayor Pro Tem about scheduling a workshop at our earliest convenience to discuss many matters, including how we can make the best use of our time during these meetings. And I will share that based on the live feedback I got in several text messages, we have some work to do. So with that, we are adjourned.
Whoa!